The sting across my cheek came so fast, I didn't even see his hand coming. One moment, I was reaching for the cranberry sauce at my own dining table. The table I'd set with my grandmother's china, the linen napkins I'd ironed that morning, the centerpiece I'd spent 2 hours arranging, and the next, my 12-year-old grandson's palm connected with my face hard enough to make my glasses shift sideways. The sound echoed through the suddenly silent dining room like a gunshot. My ears rang. My cheek burned. And for just a second, the entire world seemed to stop spinning. I'm Eleanor Whitmore. I'm 63 years old. And before that Christmas dinner in 2023, I thought I knew exactly who I was. A retired schoolteacher. A widow of 15 years. A mother who'd sacrificed everything to put her son through medical school. A grandmother who showed up to every soccer game, every piano recital, every holiday with gifts wrapped in expensive paper and a checkbook always open. I thought I knew my place in my family's life. I was wrong. Before I tell you what I did next, and believe me, what I did next changed everything, I need you to do something for me. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching this from. What city? What country? Because what happened to me that night could happen to anyone, anywhere. This isn't just my story. It's a story about what happens when kindness gets mistaken for weakness. When generosity becomes expected. When respect dies so slowly you don't even notice it's gone until someone's hand is across your face and your own son is laughing about it. And if you want to hear more stories like this, real stories about real people who reached their breaking point and did something about it, check the description box below. You'll find stories that'll make you think, make you feel, and maybe, just maybe, make you realize you're not alone in whatever you're going through. Now, back to that dining room. My hand went to my cheek automatically. The skin was hot under my fingertips, already starting to throb. Around the table, 6 pairs of eyes stared at me. My son, David, Dr. David Whitmore, as he preferred to be called now, sat at the head of the table, the spot that used to be his father's. His wife, Jessica, was to his right, her mouth forming a perfect little O of surprise that didn't quite reach her eyes. Their 3 children, Aidan, the 12-year-old who'd just struck me, Sophia, 10, and little Emma, 7, had frozen mid-bite, forks hovering in the air. For a long moment, nobody said anything. The Christmas tree lights twinkled in the corner, oblivious. Bing Crosby crooned from the speaker system about white Christmases and sleigh bells in the snow. The smell of the prime rib I'd spent 3 hours preparing still hung in the air, mixing with the cinnamon from the candles I'd lit. Then Aidan laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not an apologetic giggle. A full, genuine laugh, like he'd just pulled off the funniest prank in the world. "Did you see her face?" he said, looking at his father. "That was hilarious." I waited for David to say something. Anything. To stand up, to demand an apology, to send Aidan to his room, to do what any parent should do when their child strikes an elderly woman, strikes his own grandmother, for God's sake. Instead, my son, my only child, the boy I'd raised alone after his father died, the man I'd written check after check to support through medical school and his first practice and his first house, leaned back in his chair and smiled. Actually smiled. "Aidan, come on," he said, but his tone was amused, indulgent. "That's enough. His only playing, Mom. You know how boys are. Only playing." I felt something crack inside my chest. Not my heart, no, that had been cracking for years, so slowly I'd barely noticed. This was something else. Something that sounded like the last thread of tolerance snapping clean in two. "Playing," I repeated. My voice came out steady, which surprised me. My hands were shaking, but my voice was calm as still water. "He slapped me, David." "Oh, come on." Jessica leaned forward, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the table. She was wearing the diamond bracelet I'd bought her last Christmas, I noticed. $2,200 at Tiffany's. "Don't be so dramatic, Eleanor. Kids do things like this all the time. He didn't mean anything by it." "He hit her," I said again, looking directly at my son. "Your son just hit me in the face, and you're laughing." David's smile faded a little, but not in the way I'd hoped. He looked annoyed now, like I was the one causing a problem. "Mom, you're making this into something it's not. He barely touched you. You're fine." "Yeah, Grandma," Aidan chimed in, grinning. "You're fine. Don't be such a baby about it." Such a baby about it. This was the child I'd been funding through Ashford Preparatory Academy, one of the most exclusive private schools in Connecticut. $15,000 per semester. Room and board for their special residential program on top of that. Another $8,000 for the summer enrichment programs. I'd been writing those checks for 4 years now, ever since David had come to me with his concerns about the public schools, about how Aiden needed the right environment to thrive, how my grandson was special and gifted and deserved every advantage. I'd said yes without hesitation. Of course I had. That's what I did. I said yes. Yes to the private school. Yes to the down payment on their second home in the Berkshires. Yes to the new car when Jessica decided the year-old BMW wasn't her style anymore. Yes to the family trip to Europe, to Disney World, to the ski resort in Aspen. Yes to everything, always, because they were my family. My only family. And after losing my husband, after spending so many years alone in this big house with only memories for company, I was terrified of losing them too. But sitting there with my cheek still burning and my grandson smirking at me like I was the punchline to some private joke, I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. I'd already lost them. Not to death or distance, but to something worse. I'd lost them to entitlement. To the belief that my money and my time and my love were just things they deserved, things they could take without gratitude or respect or even basic human decency. Jessica leaned across the table then, close enough that I could smell her perfume, the expensive French one I'd bought her for her birthday. She lowered her voice to a stage whisper, but everyone could hear her perfectly. "Go on, Eleanor," she said, her eyes glittering with something that might have been amusement or might have been challenge. "Hit him back if you dare. Show us all what you're really made of." The room held its breath. I could feel them all watching me, waiting. Maybe hoping I'd snap, make a scene, give them something to talk about later, something to use against me. "Did you hear what Mom did? She actually tried to hit Aiden. Can you believe it? We're really worried about her mental state." I looked at Jessica's face, beautiful, cold, calculating. Then at David's, the face of my baby boy, now a stranger wearing my son's features. Then at Aiden, still grinning, so sure of his immunity, so confident that Grandma would never do anything, could never do anything, because Grandma was just the ATM who showed up to holidays and wrote checks and took whatever they dished out with a smile. So I smiled. It wasn't hard. I'd been smiling through things that hurt for decades now. Smiled through my husband's funeral. Smiled through the lonely holidays. Smiled through every casual cruelty, every forgotten birthday, every phone call that was really just about money. What was one more smile? "It's all right," I said softly, touching my still burning cheek. "Really? It's fine." The tension in the room evaporated immediately. David relaxed back into his chair. Jessica rolled her eyes and reached for her wine glass. Aiden went back to his phone, already bored now that the moment had passed. But I wasn't fine. And it wasn't all right. For the rest of that dinner, I played my part perfectly. I served the dessert, homemade pumpkin pie with fresh whipped cream, and accepted their compliments with gracious nods. I cleaned up while they moved to the living room to open presents. I watched Aiden tear through the expensive gaming system I'd bought him without so much as a thank you, watched Sophia and Emma squeal over their gifts, watched David and Jessica exchange knowing looks over my excessive generosity. "You really didn't have to do all this, Mom," David said, but his tone suggested he absolutely expected me to do all this and would be disappointed if I hadn't. "I wanted to," I replied. And I had wanted to see joy on their faces, gratitude in their eyes, love in their actions. Instead, I got a slap and a laugh and the slow, sick realization that I'd been buying their presents at my table for years now, and they'd been letting me. They left around 9 o'clock. Jessica had a spa appointment in the morning, she explained. David had an early surgery. The kids had plans with friends. There were hugs, brief, obligatory, and promises to see each other soon. David paused at the door, his hand on my shoulder. "You're not upset, are you, Mom? About the thing with Aiden?" The thing with Aiden. Like it was nothing. Like it hadn't happened. Like the red mark on my cheek wasn't real. "No," I lied. "I'm not upset." "Good. Because you know he didn't mean anything by it. He's just going through a phase. Preteen stuff." "Of course," I said. He kissed my forehead, the first physical affection he'd shown me all evening that wasn't performative, and then they were gone. The house fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock and the hum of the refrigerator. I stood in my empty living room, surrounded by torn wrapping paper and half-empty wine glasses and the ruins of a holiday I'd tried so hard to make perfect, and I let myself feel it. All of it. The hurt. The humiliation. The rage that had been building for longer than I wanted to admit. Then I walked to my office. I sat down at my desk, the same desk where I'd graded papers for 35 years, where I'd written college recommendation letters for hundreds of students, where I'd planned lessons and balanced budgets and, yes, where I'd written check after check after check to my son's family. I opened my laptop. I pulled up my email. And I began to type. The email was addressed to Harold Peterson, the Director of Admissions and Financial Aid at Ashford Preparatory Academy. Harold and I had met several times over the years at school functions. He knew me as the grandmother who never missed a grandparents' day, who donated to the annual fund, who made sure Aidan's tuition was paid in full at the beginning of each semester. What he didn't know was that I was done. Dear Harold, I wrote, I am writing to inform you that I will no longer be funding Aidan Whitmore's education at Ashford Preparatory. Effective immediately, I am cancelling all financial commitments, including but not limited to tuition, room and board, activity fees, and summer program costs. Please direct all future financial communications to Aidan's parents, Dr. David Whitmore and Mrs. Jessica Whitmore, as they will now be solely responsible for his educational expenses. This decision is final and not subject to reconsideration. My fingers didn't shake as I typed. My vision didn't blur. I felt calm. Clear. More certain than I'd felt about anything in years. I attached documentation showing that I was the sole contributor to Aidan's education fund. I included the account number so the school could verify everything. I made sure every detail was clear, every bridge thoroughly burned. Then I scheduled the email to send at 9 o'clock the next morning, during business hours, when Harold would be at his desk, when the school's administrative offices would be fully staffed and ready to process the information immediately. By the time David and Jessica found out, it would already be too late to stop it. I closed my laptop and sat in the quiet darkness of my office for a long time, listening to the house settle around me, feeling the ghost of a sting on my cheek. Only playing, I whispered to the empty room. Then I went upstairs, took 2 aspirin for the headache that was forming behind my eyes, and went to bed. I slept better than I had in months. Morning came cold and bright, the kind of December morning that makes everything look clean and new, even when it isn't. I woke at 6:30, like always. My internal clock hadn't cared that I was retired for 5 years now. I still rose with the sun, still felt that pull toward productivity that decades of teaching had beaten into my bones. But this morning felt different. Lighter. Somehow. Like I'd set down something heavy in the night and hadn't quite remembered what it was yet. Then I touched my cheek, still tender, slightly swollen, and it all came flooding back. The slap. The laughter. The email. I got out of bed and walked to the window. My house sat on 2 acres in Fairfield County, Connecticut, in a neighborhood where the houses had names instead of just numbers. The Whitmore Estate, the previous owners had called it, though that had always seemed pretentious to me. It was just a house. A big, beautiful, lonely house that my husband had bought 30 years ago when his dental practice was thriving, back when we'd imagined it full of grandchildren spending summers here, back when we'd thought we had all the time in the world. Now it was just me rattling around in 6,000 square feet of memories and empty rooms. I showered, dressed in comfortable clothes, jeans and a cashmere sweater, not the church clothes I usually wore even at home, some old habit about maintaining appearances even when nobody was watching. I made coffee in the French press, not the drip machine. I took my time. I sat at the kitchen island, the one David had convinced me to renovate 3 years ago, costing $40,000 because Jessica had insisted on Carrara marble and custom cabinetry, and I drank my coffee slowly, watching the clock. 8:15. 8:30. 8:45. At 9 o'clock exactly, my email would send. Harold would see it within minutes. The administrative office would start processing the cancellation. By 9:30, David's credit card would be charged for next semester's tuition, $15,000. By 10, he'd get the notification. By 10:30, his phone would start ringing. I wondered what his face would look like when he realized what I'd done. I wondered if he'd feel anything close to what I'd felt last night. My phone rang at 9:47 a.m. David's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring 4 times before answering, taking another sip of coffee. First, letting myself enjoy this moment of control. "Good morning, honey," I said, my voice warm and bright, the same voice I'd used yesterday when I was pretending everything was fine. What the hell did you do? He didn't even bother with pleasantries. His voice was sharp, angry, the tone he probably used with incompetent nurses or patients who didn't follow his orders. What the actual hell, Mom? I'm not sure what you mean, I said, though of course I knew exactly what he meant. Don't play dumb. The school just called. They said you cancelled Aiden's tuition. They charged my card $15,000. $15,000, Mom, out of nowhere, with no warning. What were you thinking? I was thinking that Aiden's education is his parents' responsibility, I said calmly, not his grandmother's. Silence on the other end. I could practically hear him recalibrating, switching from anger to the concerned son voice he used when he wanted something. Mom, come on. If this is about last night. This has nothing to do with last night, I lied smoothly. This is about the fact that Aiden is 12 years old, and you and Jessica are both gainfully employed adults with good incomes. You're a doctor, for heaven's sake. Jessica's family has money. There's no reason I should be paying for your son's private school education. We can't afford Ashford on our own. You know that. Medical school debt, the mortgage, Jessica's car payment. The second mortgage on the vacation home I paid the down payment for, the car I bought her when the first one was only a year old. Another silence, longer this time. That's not fair, he said finally. Isn't it? Tell me, David, when was the last time you paid for anything related to your children without asking me to contribute? Their clothes? Their activities? Their vacations? I've been supplementing your lifestyle for years now, and you've never once suggested that maybe you should cut back somewhere, make different choices, live within your means. You offered. His voice rose again. Every single time. You offered. You said you wanted to help, that you wanted to be involved, that it made you happy to do these things for us. He was right, of course. I had said all those things. Had meant them, even, at the time. What he didn't understand, what maybe I hadn't understood until last night, was that my generosity had been conditional all along. Not conditional on getting something back, exactly, but conditional on being treated like a person who mattered. Like someone worthy of basic respect and decency. I did want to help, I said quietly. But help is supposed to be appreciated, David. Not expected. Not demanded. And certainly not repaid with slaps and laughter. Oh, here we go. So this is about last night. I knew it. Mom, you're being ridiculous. Aiden is a kid. Kids do stupid things. He didn't mean anything by it. He slapped me in the face at my own dinner table, and you laughed. Your wife dared me to hit him back. Neither of you even asked him to apologize. Because it wasn't that serious. You're blowing this completely out of proportion. This is insane. You're punishing a 12-year-old child because your feelings got hurt. Something cold settled in my stomach. My feelings got hurt, I repeated. That's what you think this is about? Hurt feelings. What else would it be about? How about respect, David? How about the fact that your son thinks it's acceptable to strike an elderly woman because he's never faced a single consequence for his behavior in his entire life? How about the fact that you think it's funny? I didn't think it was funny. I just didn't think it was worth making a federal case over. And now you've created this massive problem for us because you're being petty and vindictive. Petty. Vindictive. The words hit harder than Aiden's hand had. I need you to fix this, David continued, taking my silence for weakness. Call the school back. Tell them there was a misunderstanding. Reinstate the funding. We can talk about this later, work something out, but right now you need to fix what you did. No, I said. What? No. I'm not fixing anything. The decision is final. Mom. You're his parents. You figure it out. Get a loan. Dip into savings. Have Jessica ask her parents for money. Sell the vacation home. I don't care. But I'm done funding a lifestyle that you clearly believe you're entitled to. We'll pull him out of Ashford, David said, and now his voice had gone cold. Is that what you want? You want your grandson in public school with gang members and drugs, Anne? Stop being dramatic. The public schools in your district are excellent. I taught in public schools for 35 years, remember? They're perfectly adequate for children whose parents can't afford $15,000 per semester for private education. Can't afford or won't afford. does it matter? Jesus Christ. He exhaled hard enough that I could hear it through the phone. I can't believe you're doing this. Over nothing. Over absolutely nothing. If it's nothing, then I'm sure you'll manage just fine without my help. Fine. His voice was tight now, clipped. The voice that meant he was about to hang up, about to storm off the way he used to when he was a teenager and didn't get his way. Fine. We'll figure it out ourselves. Don't expect us to come running every time you get lonely and want company, though. Don't expect us to drop everything for your holidays and your birthdays when you've made it clear we're just a burden to you. The threat was obvious. Comply or lose access to your only family. Give us what we want or we'll cut you off. A day ago, that threat would have worked. A day ago, I would have backpedaled immediately, would have called the school before he'd even hung up, would have done anything to keep them in my life. But something had changed. Maybe it was the slap. Maybe it was the laughter. Maybe it was 48 years of putting everyone else's needs before my own finally catching up with me. That's your choice to make, I said. But I want you to understand something, David. I love you. I love your children. I would do anything for you, anything reasonable, anything right. But I will not be disrespected in my own home and then expected to keep writing checks like nothing happened. I will not teach your children that money can erase consequences. And I will not let you emotionally blackmail me into funding a life you haven't earned. Emotionally blackmail. He laughed, bitter and sharp. That's rich, coming from you. Everything you've ever done for us has come with strings attached. Every gift, every check, every supposedly generous gesture, it's all been about control. About making us dependent on you so we'd have to keep you in our lives. His words punched the air from my lungs. Was that true? Had I been buying their love all along, manipulating them with money, creating dependence to ensure they'd never leave? No, that wasn't right. I'd given because I loved them, because I wanted to ease their burdens, because watching them struggle would have hurt more than any check I could write. But maybe David saw it differently. Maybe they all did. If that's what you believe, I said slowly, then you should be relieved that I'm stopping now. Yeah, we are relieved. Jessica's been saying for years that your generosity was toxic, that you were using money to control us. I should have listened to her. Jessica. Of course. I should have known she'd been poisoning the well, reframing my help as manipulation, my love as control. It made sense now, the casual disrespect, the entitled behavior, the way they treated my home like a hotel and my bank account like their personal trust fund. They didn't see me as a person anymore. They saw me as an obstacle. A control freak. A problem to be managed. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said, and I meant it. Not sorry for canceling the tuition, but sorry that it had come to this, sorry that my only child couldn't see the difference between generosity and manipulation, sorry that I'd failed somewhere along the way to raise a man who valued kindness over cash. Whatever. We're done here. Jessica and I will figure out what to do about Ashford. And maybe, we'll see you at Easter. If we feel like it. He hung up. I sat at my kitchen island with my cooling coffee and my swollen cheek and the vast silence of my empty house, and I didn't cry. I'd cried enough over the years. Cried when my husband died. Cried through lonely holidays. Cried every time David was too busy to visit, every time the kids forgot my birthday, every time I realized that love wasn't enough to make people treat you right. I was done crying. Instead, I did what I'd always done when emotions threatened to overwhelm me. I made a plan. If David wanted to cut me off, fine. If he wanted to paint me as the villain in their family story, fine. If he wanted to believe that I'd been controlling them with money all along, I couldn't change his mind. But I could change my life. I pulled out my laptop again and opened my financial records. I'd been meticulous about tracking every cent I'd given David's family over the years, not because I'd ever planned to hold it over their heads, but because that's just how I was. Organized. Careful. The habits of a lifetime. The total made me gasp. Over the past 10 years, I'd given them $473,000. $473,000. Down payments on houses. Car purchases. Private school tuition. Vacations. Clothes. Emergency loans that were never repaid. Furniture. Medical bills that David's insurance somehow never quite covered. Jessica's shopping trips. The kids' summer camps and ski lessons and horseback riding and God knew what else. Nearly $500,000, and they believed I'd done it to control them. I closed the laptop carefully, like it might shatter if I wasn't gentle. Then I picked up my phone and started making calls. First, my financial advisor. I wanted to update my will. Remove David as executor. Remove him as primary beneficiary. Set up a trust instead, one that would support charitable causes after I died, scholarships for underprivileged children, maybe, or the local food bank, or the animal shelter where I'd gotten my cat, Oliver. Second, my lawyer. Same reason. I wanted everything documented, everything legal, everything airtight so that when I died, David couldn't contest anything or claim I'd been mentally incompetent or coerced. Third, a real estate agent. This house was too big for one person. Too full of memories that hurt more than they comforted. It was time to downsize, to move somewhere smaller, somewhere without ghosts in every corner. By noon, I'd set all the wheels in motion. By 1 o'clock, I'd eaten lunch, leftover prime rib from last night, which tasted better in the quiet of my kitchen than it had at the dinner table with my family's judgment hanging in the air. By 2 o'clock, I was in my car, driving to the bookstore. I bought 3 novels I'd been meaning to read and a travel guide for Ireland. I'd always wanted to visit. My grandmother had been born in Cork, but there had never been time, never been money, never been permission somehow, though I couldn't have said whose permission I'd been waiting for. Now I had time. I had money. And I didn't need anyone's permission anymore. That night, I sat in my favorite chair with Oliver curled in my lap and one of the novels open in front of me, and I let myself imagine a different kind of life. A life where I woke up when I wanted and ate what I wanted and spent my days doing things that made me happy instead of things that made other people appreciate me. A life where I traveled and read and took art classes and volunteered and made friends who liked me for who I was, not what I could give them. A life where Christmas dinner was peaceful and quiet, just me and maybe a friend or two, and nobody slapped me, and nobody laughed. My phone buzzed around 8 o'clock. A text from Jessica. Just so you know, Aiden is devastated. He thinks you hate him. Hope you're happy. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling the guilt try to worm its way back in, try to convince me that I was the villain after all, that I'd hurt a child, that I should apologize and fix everything and go back to being the grandmother who said yes to everything. Then I remembered the smirk on Aiden's face. The laugh. The way he'd called me a baby for having the audacity to be hurt by being struck. And I remembered something I used to tell my students when they tried to manipulate me with tears or anger or guilt. Actions have consequences. That's not punishment. That's just life. I deleted Jessica's text without responding. Then I opened my laptop and booked a flight to Ireland for March. I had a life to start living. If you've ever been the one to set a boundary after years of saying yes to everything, you know exactly what the next few weeks look like. The guilt. The second guessing. The nights lying awake wondering if you'd overreacted, if you'd thrown away something precious over pride, if maybe you should just apologize and make it all go away. But you also know what happens when you hold firm. When you don't give in. When you finally stand up for yourself after decades of being pushed down. The people who've been using you suddenly have to face themselves. And they don't like what they see. 3 days after the phone call with David, a letter arrived at my house. Handwritten, in Jessica's looping script, on expensive stationery that I'd probably paid for at some point. I almost didn't open it. Almost threw it directly into the recycling bin and saved myself the trouble. But curiosity won out. It always does. Dear Eleanor, it began, not Mom, which was what she'd called me for 15 years, but Eleanor, as if we were strangers now. I feel compelled to reach out regarding the situation with Aiden's schooling. While I understand you may have felt slighted by what happened at Christmas dinner, I think your reaction has been disproportionate and, frankly, concerning. I skimmed the rest. It was 2 pages of carefully worded accusations disguised as concern. I was acting erratically. I was allowing hurt feelings to cloud my judgment. I was punishing innocent children for adult disagreements. I was jeopardizing Aiden's future because of a momentary lapse in his behavior that any reasonable person would have overlooked. The letter ended with an ultimatum. We're willing to move past this incident if you are. If you reinstate the funding by the end of the month, we can all put this behind us and move forward as a family. If you choose not to, I'm afraid we'll have to limit contact for the children's sake. We can't expose them to this kind of unpredictable behavior. I read that last line 3 times. We can't expose them to this kind of unpredictable behavior. The behavior of not accepting being slapped was unpredictable. The behavior of expecting consequences for cruelty was concerning. The behavior of refusing to be a bank machine was erratic. I folded the letter carefully, put it back in its envelope, and filed it away in a folder I'd labeled family documentation. I had a feeling I might need evidence of their attitudes later. Then I wrote back. "Dear Jessica," I typed. "Thank you for your letter. I appreciate you taking the time to share your thoughts. I want to be clear about something. This is not about hurt feelings or momentary lapses in judgment. This is about teaching children that actions have consequences, and that disrespect, particularly toward elders, particularly in someone's own home, is unacceptable. The fact that you view my response as unpredictable behavior, rather than a natural consequence of Aiden's actions, tells me everything I need to know about how you've been framing my role in your family. I am not a punishment. I am not a resource to be managed. I am a person who deserves respect, and I will no longer accept less than that. If you choose to limit contact, that is your decision to make. But know that the door to a respectful relationship remains open whenever you're ready to walk through it. With love, Eleanor." I mailed it that afternoon. I didn't expect it to change anything. But I needed her to know, needed all of them to know, that I saw exactly what they were doing. That I understood the manipulation, the emotional blackmail, the attempt to make me responsible for their choices. A week passed. Then another. My phone stayed quiet except for telemarketers and my friend Carol from book club. No calls from David. No texts from the kids. No surprise visits. Exactly what they'd threatened. The isolation should have hurt more than it did. Should have sent me spiraling into loneliness and regret. Should have made me pick up the phone and beg them to come back, to let me see my grandchildren, to give me another chance. Instead, I felt lighter than I had in years. I started going to a yoga class on Tuesday mornings. I'd driven past the studio for months, always thinking maybe next week, always finding excuses. Now there was no reason not to go. No one to cook for. No schedule to work around. Just me and my mat and an hour of quiet movement that made my body feel alive again. I joined a watercolor painting group that met Thursday afternoons at the community center. I was terrible at it. My trees looked like green blobs and my skies were always muddy. But the instructor, a woman named Patricia who'd taught high school art for 40 years, just laughed and told me to keep trying. "Art isn't about being good," she said. "It's about showing up." I'd spent my whole life being good. Maybe it was time to just show up. I started volunteering at the library on Saturday mornings, helping with the children's reading program. The kids were loud and chaotic and absolutely nothing like the well-behaved students I taught in my classroom. They wiped their noses on their sleeves and interrupted constantly and sometimes forgot to say please and thank you. But when I read to them, really read, doing all the voices and letting my expression go big and dramatic, they lit up. They leaned in. They gasped at the right moments and laughed at the funny parts and begged for one more chapter. They saw me. Not as a bank account or an obligation or a source of gifts. Just as a person who cared about them, who showed up, who made storytime fun. It was the first time in years I'd felt truly useful. 3 weeks after Christmas, my phone rang at 7 in the morning. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mrs. Whitmore." A woman's voice, professional and slightly hesitant. "This is Amanda Chen from Ashford." I stopped her immediately. "I'm sorry, could you repeat your name?" "Amanda Liu," she corrected. "From Ashford Preparatory Academy. I'm the student counselor. Do you have a moment to speak?" My heart picked up speed. I set down my coffee cup carefully. Of course. I wanted to reach out personally to discuss Aiden Whitmore. I understand you were his primary financial supporter and that you've recently withdrawn that support. That's correct. I see. A pause. Papers rustling in the background. "Mrs. Whitmore, I want to be clear that I'm not calling to pressure you or to ask you to reconsider your decision. That's entirely your business. But I do feel obligated to share some information about Aiden's situation here at school." My throat tightened. Is he all right? Physically, yes. Emotionally, that's more complicated. "Mrs. Whitmore, has anyone told you about the incidents we've been documenting this semester?" Incidents. More rustling. Aiden has been involved in several disciplinary situations over the past few months. Bullying younger students. Defacing school property. Disrespecting teachers. We've been working with his parents to address these behaviors, but frankly, We haven't seen much improvement. If anything, the behavior has escalated. I sank into my kitchen chair. I didn't know. I suspected as much. Your son and daughter-in-law have been resistant to our recommendations. They tend to minimize Aiden's actions or blame other children for instigating. We've suggested counseling, both individual and family therapy. They've declined. Why are you telling me this? Amanda sighed. Because in my 15 years as a school counselor, I've learned that behavior like Aiden's doesn't come from nowhere. It's learned. And when I heard that he struck you at a family dinner and his parents laughed about it. Yes, it's in our notes. Your son mentioned it when he called to contest the tuition charges. Everything suddenly made sense. My cheek hadn't hurt in days, but I touched it anyway, remembering. What do you mean? Children who are allowed to disrespect authority figures, who face no consequences for cruelty, who are taught that their feelings and desires matter more than anyone else's, they struggle here. They struggle everywhere, really, but especially in environments like ours that require discipline and respect and accountability. Aiden is brilliant, Mrs. Whitmore. His test scores are exceptional. But brilliance without character is just potential wasted. I closed my eyes. You think I made the right decision? I think you made the only decision that might actually help this child in the long run. His parents have requested financial aid, by the way. We'll likely be able to offer them something, maybe 40% of tuition. But that still leaves them responsible for a substantial amount. They're not happy about it. I imagine not. Mrs. Whitmore, may I be frank with you? Please. In situations like this, grandparents often carry tremendous guilt. They worry they're abandoning their grandchildren, failing their family, being selfish. But from where I sit, you're the first adult in Aiden's life who's actually treating him like his behavior matters. You're the first person who's shown him that actions have real consequences. That's not abandonment. That's love. My throat closed up. I had to swallow 3 times before I could speak. Thank you for saying that. I mean it. Whatever you decide going forward, please know that you haven't hurt this child. His parents' choices have hurt him. Your choice might actually save him. We talked for a few more minutes about resources for children with behavioral issues, about what might happen if Aiden's conduct didn't improve, about the school's policies and procedures. Then Amanda wished me well and hung up. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after that call, staring at nothing, feeling something shift inside my chest. The guilt that had been gnawing at me since Christmas, the voice that kept whispering that I was being petty, vindictive, cruel, finally went quiet. I hadn't been punishing a child. I'd been refusing to enable his parents' failure to raise him properly. That afternoon, I called my lawyer again. I want to set up an education trust, I told him. For my grandchildren. But with conditions. What kind of conditions? It can only be accessed if they maintain good grades and good conduct. No disciplinary issues. No bullying. No disrespect toward teachers or other students. And it can't be controlled by their parents. It needs to be managed by an independent trustee who'll verify that the conditions are met. That's specific. I have specific reasons. He agreed to draw up the papers. The trust would hold enough money to cover college tuition for all 3 grandchildren, plus graduate school if they wanted it. But David and Jessica would have no access to it. No control over it. No way to manipulate their children with it or use it to maintain the lifestyle they thought they deserved. If Aiden wanted to go to college, he could. But only if he learned to be a decent human being first. 2 days later, on a frigid January evening, there was a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Carol wasn't due until tomorrow for our weekly tea. The grocery delivery wasn't scheduled. My heart did something complicated, half hope and half dread, as I walked to the foyer. Through the peephole, I saw David. He was alone. No Jessica, no kids. He stood on my doorstep with his hands shoved in his pockets, his breath forming clouds in the cold air, looking smaller somehow than I remembered. Older. Tired. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. David. Mom. He shifted his weight from foot to foot. Can we talk? We're talking now. Can I come in? It's freezing out here. I hesitated, then stepped aside. He came in, bringing cold air and the smell of his cologne, the expensive stuff Jessica had bought him with my credit card last Father's Day. He stood in my foyer, looking around like he'd never seen the place before, even though he'd grown up here, even though every corner held memories of his childhood. "Nice Christmas tree," he said, gesturing to the bare corner where the tree had been. "I'd taken it down a week ago, not wanting to look at it anymore. I took it down." "Oh." Another uncomfortable pause. "Look, Mom, I came to apologize." My eyebrows went up. "Did you?" "Jessica thought I should. She said maybe we overreacted. About the whole tuition thing. Jessica thought you should apologize." He had the grace to look embarrassed. "I should have called sooner. I know things got heated. I said some things I didn't mean." "Such as?" "The stuff about you using money to control us. That wasn't fair." "But you said it. You must have thought it, at least a little bit." He looked at his feet. "Jessica's been stressed. Money's tight right now. The house payment, the cars, Aiden's therapy." "Therapy?" I interrupted. "I thought you said you weren't taking him to therapy." "We started last week. The school kind of insisted. Said they'd expel him if we didn't. It's expensive, Mom. $200 a session, twice a week, and insurance barely covers any of it." Ah. There it was. The real reason for the apology. Not actual remorse. Not genuine reflection on what had happened. Just more money problems and the hope that the ATM would start working again. "I'm glad he's in therapy," I said carefully. "He needs it." "Yeah, well, we can't afford it and Ashford both. Not without help. So I came to ask, to see if maybe we could work something out. Maybe you could help with the therapy costs. Or Jessica's been thinking about going back to work part-time, but would need help with childcare, and..." "No." The word hung in the air between us like a wall. David's head snapped up. "What?" "No. I'm not helping with therapy costs or childcare or anything else. You're Aiden's parents. This is your responsibility. But you've always helped before. You've always been there when we needed you." "I was. And you took it for granted. You took me for granted. You let your son slap me in the face and laughed about it. David. Do you understand what that did to me?" "It was a mistake, Mom. He's 12. He didn't know what he was doing." "He knew exactly what he was doing. And so did you. You knew it was wrong, and you chose to minimize it, to mock me for being hurt, to make me feel like I was the problem for not just accepting it." "I'm sorry." He spread his hands. "I'm really, truly sorry. What else do you want me to say?" "I want you to understand why I'm saying no. I want you to grasp that this isn't about punishment or revenge. It's about the fact that for 10 years, I've been supplementing your lifestyle, making it possible for you to live beyond your means, and in return, you've treated me like an inconvenience. Like someone who only matters when you need something." "That's not true." "When was the last time you called me just to talk? When was the last time you visited without asking for money? When was the last time you remembered my birthday without Jessica reminding you?" Silence. "That's what I thought." David's jaw tightened. "So that's it? You're just done with us? Your only son, your grandchildren, you're just cutting us off?" "I'm not cutting you off. You're welcome here anytime. You can call me, visit me, include me in your lives. But I won't be your bank anymore. I won't be the person you manipulate with guilt and threatened loss of access to my grandchildren. If you want a relationship with me, it needs to be a real one. One based on love and respect, not financial dependence." "This is ridiculous." His voice rose. "You're being incredibly selfish, Mom. This isn't just about you. 3 kids are going to suffer because you can't get over one little incident." "One little incident," I repeated. "Is that still what you're calling it?" "Jesus Christ, he slapped you. He didn't stab you. Kids do things like that all the time. It's not the end of the world." And there it was. Even now, even after coming here to apologize, he still didn't get it. Still couldn't see what was wrong with what had happened. Still couldn't understand why I'd reached my breaking point. Maybe he never would. "I think you should go," I said quietly. "Mom." "I mean it, David. I don't want to say things I'll regret. So please, just go." He stood there for another moment, his face cycling through emotions I couldn't quite read. Anger. Frustration. Maybe a little bit of genuine hurt buried underneath. Then he turned and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the knob. Jessica was right about you. You are a control freak. Everything has to be your way or no way at all. If expecting basic respect is being a control freak, then I guess I am one. Don't expect us to come crawling back when you change your mind. We're done being your puppets. He slammed the door on his way out. I stood in my foyer, listening to his car start and pull away, listening to the silence settle back over my house like snow. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. But underneath the adrenaline and hurt, I felt something unexpected. Relief. I'd thought standing my ground would feel like loss. Like grief. Like cutting off a piece of myself and watching it bleed. Instead, it felt like freedom. That night, I called Carol. Can I come over? I asked. I need a friend. Always, she said without hesitation. I'll put the kettle on. I drove to her house, a modest split level in town, nothing like my sprawling estate, and spent 3 hours at her kitchen table, drinking tea and telling her everything. About the slap. About the phone calls and the letter. About David's visit tonight and the words he'd thrown at me on his way out the door. Carol listened without interrupting, without judging, without trying to fix anything. When I finally ran out of words, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You did the right thing, she said. Did I? Because it doesn't feel right. It feels horrible. Doing the right thing usually does, at first. Give it time. The horrible feeling will fade. But the self-respect you've reclaimed? That's forever. I drove home that night with her words echoing in my head, with the taste of chamomile tea still on my tongue, with the warmth of friendship wrapping around my shoulders like a blanket. Maybe I had lost my son. But I'd found myself. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, that felt like enough. February arrived like a guest who doesn't know when to leave, cold, grey, dragging itself through short days and long nights. I kept busy. That became my mantra, my survival strategy, my reason to get out of bed every morning. Yoga on Tuesdays. Painting on Thursdays. Library volunteering on Saturdays. Lunch with Carol every Wednesday. Physical therapy twice a week for the arthritis in my knee that I'd been ignoring for years. I was busier retired than I'd ever been while working. And I was happier than I'd been in a decade. My phone still didn't ring with calls from David. No texts from the grandchildren. Nothing from Jessica except one message that simply said, "You'll regret this," which I deleted without responding. But my house felt lighter somehow. I stopped tensing every time I heard a car in the driveway, stopped checking my phone constantly for messages that would inevitably be requests disguised as concern. I ate when I was hungry instead of when it was socially appropriate. I went to bed at 9 o'clock if I felt like it and stayed up until midnight reading if I didn't. I lived by my own rules for the first time since my husband died, maybe for the first time since I got married at 22 and my life became about meeting other people's needs before my own. On February 14th, Valentine's Day, the universe's little joke on the lonely, I got a letter from Ashford Preparatory Academy. It was official looking, the kind of envelope that makes your heart skip even when you're not expecting bad news. The school's emblem was embossed on the front, the paper heavy and expensive. I opened it standing at my mailbox, cold air numbing my fingers. Dear Mrs. Whitmore, it began. On behalf of the faculty and administration of Ashford Preparatory Academy, I am writing to inform you of a serious situation involving your grandson, Aidan Whitmore. My stomach dropped. I read the rest right there in the cold, unable to wait even the 30 seconds it would take to walk back inside. Aidan had been involved in what the letter delicately termed a significant behavioral incident 3 days ago. He'd been caught vandalizing another student's property, specifically, destroying a science project that had taken the other child months to complete. When confronted by a teacher, he'd been verbally abusive, using language that violated every standard of conduct expected at our institution. When the other students' parents were contacted, it came out that this wasn't an isolated incident. Aidan had been systematically bullying this child for weeks, stealing his belongings, spreading rumors about him, enlisting other students to exclude him. The letter went on to describe the school's zero-tolerance policy for bullying. Aidan had been suspended for 2 weeks. Upon his return, he would be placed on academic and behavioral probation. Any further incidents would result in immediate expulsion. But that wasn't the part that made my hands shake. The final paragraph was what did it. We feel it necessary to note that during our conversations with Aiden about his behavior, he has shown no remorse and, in fact, has stated multiple times that he doesn't understand why anyone cares. When asked how he would feel if someone treated him the way he's been treating his peer, his response was, and I quote, "I'd just hit them back harder. That's what my dad says, don't be a victim." We believe this attitude reflects a concerning pattern of learned behavior that will require substantial intervention to correct. We strongly encourage Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore to engage with our recommended counseling resources and to examine the family dynamics that may be contributing to these attitudes. I read that paragraph 3 times, each word settling into my chest like stones. Don't be a victim. Hit them back harder. David's words. David's philosophy. The same mindset that had allowed him to laugh when his son struck me, the same worldview that treated kindness as weakness and boundaries as control. And now his 12-year-old son was destroying other children's work and seeing nothing wrong with it. I walked back to my house in a daze, the letter clutched in my hand. I sat at my kitchen table, the expensive marble one that Jessica had insisted on, and I let myself feel the full weight of what I was reading. This was my fault too. Not the slap. Not Aiden's behavior, exactly, but the environment that had created it. I'd been so busy writing checks, so focused on keeping them happy and close and dependent, that I hadn't noticed what I was enabling. Hadn't seen that my money was allowing David and Jessica to avoid consequences, to live beyond their means, to teach their children that the world would always bend to accommodate them. I'd thought I was helping. I'd been hurting them. The realization sat heavy in my throat. I got up, made myself tea I didn't drink, sat back down, stood up again. My house felt too big and too empty and too full of my own mistakes all at once. My phone rang. Unknown number again. I answered without thinking. Mrs. Whitmore? This is Helen Rodriguez. I'm the mother of Tyler Rodriguez. He's the student your grandson has been bullying. My heart sank further. Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm so sorry. I just received the letter from the school. I don't know what to say. I'm not calling for an apology. Her voice was calm but tired, the voice of a mother who'd been fighting for her child and losing. I'm calling because I think you should know something that wasn't in that letter. Something the school doesn't know about. What? Tyler came home last week with bruises on his arms. When I finally got him to tell me what happened, he said Aiden had shoved him into a locker. Hard. He's been having nightmares, Mrs. Whitmore. My 10-year-old son is terrified to go to school because of your grandson. The room spun. Did you tell the school? Tyler won't let me. He's afraid it'll make things worse, that Aiden will hurt him more. And maybe he's right. The school can punish Aiden for the vandalism, but they can't watch him every second. And from what Tyler says, Aiden is very good at not getting caught. I don't know what to say. This is horrifying. If I'd known. I know you're not paying for his school anymore. Tyler told me. He heard Aiden bragging about it to the other boys, saying his grandma was rich and crazy and he didn't care if she stopped giving them money because his dad says she's just trying to control them anyway. Every word was a knife. Mrs. Rodriguez, I need you to know that I didn't withdraw my financial support to punish Aiden. I did it because his parents needed to take responsibility for their choices. But if I'd known it would lead to this. I don't think you withdrawing money led to this, Mrs. Whitmore. I think this is who Aiden is. Who his parents have made him. Money or no money, he was always going to hurt someone. Tyler is just the unlucky one who became his target. We talked for another 10 minutes. I learned that Tyler was a scholarship student, that his family couldn't afford to send him anywhere else, that Helen and her husband had considered withdrawing him from Ashford but he'd begged to stay, insisting he could handle it, not wanting to lose the opportunities the school offered. I'm telling you this, Helen said before we hung up, because I think you should understand what's at stake. This isn't just about tuition payments or family drama. Your grandson is genuinely hurting people. And unless something changes, he's going to keep hurting people his entire life. After she hung up, I sat with my phone in my hand for a long time, staring at nothing. Then I did something I probably shouldn't have done. I called David. He answered on the third ring, his voice clipped. What? Did you get the letter from Ashford? What letter? About Aiden's suspension. About the bullying. A pause. Oh. That. Yeah, we got it. It's overblown. The other kid is making it into a bigger deal than it is. You know how sensitive people are these days. Everything is bullying, everything is traumatic. Kid probably deserved it anyway. My blood turned to ice. Deserved it. He's one of the scholarship kids. Doesn't fit in. Probably said something to Aiden first. Schools always take the poor kid's side in these situations. Makes them look progressive. David. My voice came out strangled. You cannot be serious. Your son destroyed another child's property. He's been physically and emotionally tormenting this boy for weeks. And your response is that the victim probably deserved it. I'm saying that Aiden is a good kid who's dealing with a lot right now. His grandma abandoned him, we're struggling financially because of your selfishness, and now some oversensitive kid and his parents are trying to get him expelled. He's acting out. It's understandable. He's 12 years old and he assaulted someone. And instead of teaching him accountability, you're making excuses and blaming everyone else. I'm supporting my son. Which is more than I can say for you supporting me. Supporting him would mean showing him that his behavior is unacceptable. It would mean consequences and therapy and actually parenting him instead of just defending everything he does. You know what, Mom? I don't need parenting advice from someone who raised a son so damaged that he apparently can't do anything right in your eyes. Maybe if you'd been less controlling when I was growing up, I'd be better at this. Maybe this is your fault too. The words hit like physical blows. Maybe this is your fault too. I'm done with this conversation, I whispered. Good. We're done period. Don't call here again. Don't send any more letters. You want to write us out of your life? Fine. Consider it done. He hung up. I set the phone down very carefully, like it might explode if I wasn't gentle. Then I walked upstairs to my bedroom, lay down on top of the covers fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling. Was he right? Had I somehow damaged my son so badly that he couldn't be a good father? Had my parenting created the environment that led to this? I'd been strict with David as a child, yes. Expected good grades and good behavior and respect for authority. I'd said no sometimes, set boundaries, enforced consequences when he broke rules. I'd thought that was normal parenting, healthy parenting, the kind of structure children needed to become functional adults. But maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe I'd been too controlling, too demanding, too focused on behavior and not enough on feelings. Maybe David had grown up resenting me, had married someone who would validate that resentment, had decided to parent in the exact opposite way. No rules, no consequences, just unconditional acceptance of whatever his children did. And now his son was hurting people. I must have fallen asleep like that, because the next thing I knew, it was dark outside and my phone was ringing again. Carol's name lit up the screen. Hello, I croaked. Eleanor, you sound awful. Are you sick? No. Just tired. Liar. I can hear it in your voice. What happened? So I told her. About the letter. About Tyler Rodriguez and his nightmares. About David's response, his accusations, his final dismissal of me from his life. Carol listened without interrupting, like she always did. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Do you remember Bryce Hawthorne? She finally asked. From our teaching days. Yes. Brilliant kid. Straight A's. Harvard scholarship. Ended up in prison for embezzlement 5 years after graduation. I remember. Do you remember his mother? I thought back. She was permissive. Very involved, but never set boundaries. Defended him when teachers gave him consequences. Exactly. And do you remember Jeremy Polk? Struggled academically but worked harder than any student I ever taught. Full ride to community college, then transferred to state. Now he's an engineer with 3 kids and volunteers at the youth center. His parents were tough on him. High expectations. Right. So here's my question, Eleanor. Which parenting style created the better human? The one who enabled and defended and made excuses? Or the one who set standards and enforced consequences? It's not that simple. Isn't it? You didn't damage David. You gave him structure and discipline and love. What he's doing with Aiden, that's his choice. His and Jessica's. And the fact that their child is turning into a bully is a consequence of their choices, not yours. But what if? No. Listen to me. You need to stop taking responsibility for everyone else's decisions. David is a grown man. He chose to laugh when his son struck you. He chose to prioritize money over teaching his children values. He chose to blame everyone but himself for Aiden's behavior. Those are his choices, not yours. I closed my eyes. It still hurts. Of course it hurts. He's your son. You love him. But love doesn't mean accepting unacceptable behavior. Love doesn't mean enabling destruction. Sometimes love means stepping back and letting people face the consequences of their actions, even when it breaks your heart. After we hung up, I lay in the darkness thinking about everything she'd said. About choices and consequences. About the difference between enabling and supporting. About how sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. My phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number. Mrs. Whitmore, this is Amanda Liu from Ashford. I wanted to reach out personally after the events of this week. I know this must be difficult for you. If you'd like to talk, I'm available. Sometimes family members need support too. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I texted back, thank you. I might take you up on that. And then I did something I should have done years ago. I stopped trying to fix everything. I stopped trying to save people who didn't want to be saved. I stopped setting myself on fire to keep other people warm. I got up, washed my face, made myself dinner, real dinner, not the tea and toast I'd been living on, and I ate it slowly, tasting every bite. Then I opened my laptop and looked at the island travel guide I'd bookmarked. My flight was in 3 weeks. I couldn't wait. March came in like a promise, warmer days, longer light, the kind of weather that makes you believe winter might actually end. My island trip was scheduled for March 15th. I'd spent weeks planning it, booking a small cottage in County Cork, researching family history, mapping out drives through the countryside my grandmother had told me stories about when I was young. I was counting down the days like a prisoner marking time on a cell wall. But the universe, as it tends to do, had other plans. On March 3rd, a Saturday morning when I should have been at the library reading to children, my doorbell rang at 7:30 a.m. I was still in my bathrobe, coffee mug in hand, hair uncombed. I wasn't expecting anyone. For a moment, I considered not answering. Then I looked through the peephole and saw Sophia. My 10-year-old granddaughter stood on my doorstep alone, her backpack slung over one shoulder, tears streaming down her face. I had the door open in seconds. Sophia. Sweetheart, what's wrong? Where are your parents? She looked up at me with eyes that were too old for her face, too tired, too sad. Can I come in, Grandma? Of course, of course. I pulled her inside, closed the door against the cold. Are you hurt? What happened? Does your mother know you're here? No. She set her backpack down carefully, like it might break. I took an Uber. I used Mom's credit card. She's going to be so mad. You took an Uber? Sophia, you're 10 years old. That's not safe. You can't. I stopped myself. She was shaking, her shoulders hunched, her hands clenched into fists. Whatever had driven her here was serious enough to override every safety rule she'd been taught. Never mind. We'll deal with that later. Are you okay? She shook her head, and then she was crying, really crying, the kind of sobbing that comes from deep in the chest, the kind that hurts. I wrapped my arms around her and held on while she fell apart on my foyer floor. This child I hadn't seen in 2 months, this granddaughter who'd been kept from me as punishment for having boundaries. When the worst of it passed, I led her to the kitchen, made her hot chocolate the way she liked it, too much whipped cream, chocolate sprinkles on top, and waited. Aiden got expelled, she finally said. My heart sank. When? Yesterday. He did something at school. I don't know what exactly, but it was bad. Mom and Dad had to go pick him up and the headmaster told them he couldn't come back. Ever. Oh, Sophia. That's not the worst part. She stared into her hot chocolate like she could see the future in it. Mom and Dad have been fighting. Like, really fighting. Screaming at each other, throwing things, slamming doors. It's been going on for weeks, but it got really bad after Aiden got expelled. Mom says it's Dad's fault for babying him. Dad says it's Mom's fault for being too hard on him. They both say it's your fault for cutting off the money. Sweetheart, that's not. I know it's not your fault, Grandma. I'm not stupid. Aiden's been awful for a long time. He's mean to me and Emma all the time. He broke my tablet last month because I wouldn't let him use it, and Dad just bought him his own instead of making him replace mine. He calls me names. He pushed Emma down the stairs once. She was okay, but he did it on purpose and Mom just said he was playing around. Every word was another stone in my chest. I didn't know any of this. How would you? They haven't let us see you since Christmas. They told us you didn't want to see us anymore, that you were mad at us, that you said we were spoiled brats. My vision blurred. I never said that. I would never say that. I love you, Sophia. You and Emma and even Aiden, though he's got a lot of growing up to do. I know. I knew they were lying. That's why I came here. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. I found this in Dad's study. I think you should read it. The paper was an email, printed out, dated 2 weeks ago. From Jessica's father, Theodore Walsh, a man I'd met exactly twice, both times at events where he'd barely acknowledged my existence. Old money, the kind that came with country clubs and yacht clubs and the firm belief that anyone who'd ever worked for a living was beneath notice. The email was addressed to David. David, I've discussed the situation with my lawyers and they've advised me that you have grounds for a financial elder abuse claim against your mother. Given her erratic behavior and the way she's used money to control your family for years, a judge would likely find her mentally incompetent and assign you power of attorney. This would give you access to her assets and allow you to make decisions about her care going forward. The fact that she's isolated herself, changed her will, and cut off contact with family will work in our favor. These are classic signs of diminished capacity. I can recommend an attorney who specializes in these cases. We should move quickly before she does any more damage. Best, Theodore. I read it 3 times, each time feeling colder. They wanted to have me declared incompetent. They wanted to take control of my money, my life, my decisions. They were planning to paint my boundaries as mental illness, my self-respect as elder abuse, my refusal to be an ATM as evidence that I wasn't capable of managing my own affairs. Grandma. Sophia's voice was small. Are you okay? I set the email down very carefully. Did your father respond to this? I don't know. But I heard him and Mom talking about it last night. Mom said they should wait until after the custody hearing. Custody hearing? Sophia's face crumpled. They're getting divorced. Dad moved out yesterday after Aiden got expelled. He's staying at a hotel. Mom's filing for divorce and she's going to ask for full custody of us kids, and Dad says he'll fight her for it, and everyone is yelling all the time and I just wanted to see you. I wanted to be somewhere quiet. This child. This beautiful, sensitive, 10-year-old child who should be worrying about homework and friends and whether she'd make the soccer team, was instead navigating her parents' divorce and her family's implosion and the knowledge that the adults in her life were all failing her. I pulled her close again. You can stay as long as you need to, sweetheart. But we need to call your mother and let her know you're safe. She's going to be mad. She's going to be worried. There's a difference. I called Jessica's cell. She answered on the first ring, her voice frantic. Sophia, where are you? I've been. Jessica, it's Eleanor. Sophia is here with me. She's safe. Silence for 3 beats. Then, what the hell is she doing there? She came to see me. She's upset about. Put her on the phone. Right now. I looked at Sophia, who was shaking her head frantically, eyes wide with fear. I think it's better if she stays here for a bit. She needs some calm, some space. You don't get to decide what my daughter needs. You lost that right when you decided to abandon this family. Put her on the phone. I took a breath, steadying myself. Jessica, I know things are difficult right now. I know about Aiden's expulsion. I know you and David are separating. Sophia is safe here. She can stay for the day, maybe the weekend if she needs to. Sometimes children need a neutral space when their parents are going through something hard. Neutral. Jessica's laugh was sharp, brittle. You're not neutral. You're the reason all of this is happening. If you hadn't cut off the money, if you hadn't caused all this stress, none of this would be falling apart. Jessica. I kept my voice calm, even though my heart was racing. Your marriage problems aren't because I stopped paying for your lifestyle. Your son's behavior problems aren't because I set a boundary. These are issues that existed long before Christmas dinner. How dare you? How dare you psychoanalyze my family when you destroyed your own son? When you were such a controlling, miserable mother that David spent his entire childhood trying to escape you. The words should have hurt more than they did. Maybe I was building calluses. If that's how you both see it, then I'm sorry. But right now, your daughter needs stability. I can provide that for a few days while you and David figure things out. Please. For Sophia's sake. Another silence. Then, fine. She can stay until Sunday night. But Eleanor, this doesn't change anything. We're still done with you. And when this divorce is final, you'll never see these children again. I'll make sure of it. She hung up. I set the phone down and realized my hands were shaking. Sophia was watching me with those two old eyes. Is she really mad? She's scared and stressed and going through something very hard. Sometimes adults say things they don't mean when they're scared. Do you mean it? Can I really stay? Of course you can. For as long as you need. Her face transformed. The fear melted away, replaced by something like hope. Can we make cookies? Such a simple request. Such a normal, childlike thing to want. When was the last time someone had let this little girl just be a child? We can make whatever you want, I said. We spent the day in the kitchen, just the two of us. We made chocolate chip cookies from scratch, my mother's recipe, the one I'd made with David when he was young, before everything got complicated. We made too much dough and ate it raw, giggling like conspirators. We played music too loud and danced while we waited for the cookies to bake. We ate lunch sitting on the floor of the living room, having an indoor picnic because Sophia said the dining room table felt too formal. She talked. About school, about her friends, about the book series she was reading. About how Emma had been wetting the bed again since the fighting started. About how Aiden had been getting meaner and meaner, how he told Sophia last week that she was stupid and worthless and nobody would ever love her. Did you tell your parents? I asked. I tried to tell Mom. She said Aiden was just stressed about school stuff and I shouldn't take it personally. That must have felt awful. It did. She paused, cookie in hand. Grandma, why don't grown-ups believe kids when we tell them things? It was such a simple question with such a complicated answer. Sometimes grown-ups are so caught up in their own problems that they can't see what's happening right in front of them. Sometimes they don't want to see it because it would mean admitting they've made mistakes. And sometimes. I chose my words carefully. Sometimes grown-ups fail children. And that's not the children's fault. That's on us. Is that what happened with Aiden? Did Mom and Dad fail him? I think your parents love all of you very much. But yes, I think they've made some mistakes with Aiden. They've let him believe that he doesn't have to face consequences for his actions. And now he's learning the hard way that the world doesn't work that way. I heard Mom say that the school where he's going now is for troubled teens. She was crying about it. My heart sank. What school? I don't know the name. But she said it's like a boarding school but stricter. He has to go there for the rest of the year and maybe next year too. She said it costs even more than Ashford and they can't afford it but they don't have a choice. A therapeutic boarding school. The kind of place that was part school, part rehabilitation, the last stop before juvenile detention for kids whose behavior had spiraled out of control. It had come to that. I feel bad for Aiden, Sophia said quietly. Even though he's mean to me, I don't want him to have to go away. That's because you have a kind heart. It's okay to feel sad for him and still know that he needs help you can't give him. She nodded slowly, processing this. Then, Grandma, are you really crazy like Dad says? The question caught me off guard. Do I seem crazy to you? No. You seem like the most normal person in my whole family. I laughed, surprising myself. Well, that's probably the nicest thing anyone's said to me in months. That night, we watched movies curled up on the couch with Oliver the cat between us, buried in blankets and leftover cookies. Sophia fell asleep halfway through the second movie, her head on my shoulder, peaceful in a way I suspected she hadn't been in months. I carried her up to the guest room, the one I'd always hoped would be used for grandchildren's visits, and tucked her in. She didn't wake up, just mumbled something and curled into the pillow. I went back downstairs and sat in the dark living room, thinking. The email from Theodore Walsh sat on the coffee table where I'd left it. Financial elder abuse. Diminished capacity. Power of attorney. They were going to try to have me declared incompetent. They were going to argue that my perfectly reasonable boundaries were evidence of mental decline. They were going to use my own choices, selling my house, planning trips, changing my will, as proof that I couldn't manage my own life. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer. It was after 9, but Mark had told me I could reach him anytime. Eleanor, everything okay? No. I need to see you first thing Monday morning. And Mark, we need to make sure everything is absolutely airtight. My will, my power of attorney, my healthcare directives, everything. Because my son and his father-in-law are planning to challenge my competency. Silence on the other end. Then, Jesus. Okay. I'll clear my calendar. Can you email me anything you have in writing? Any evidence of their intentions? I'll scan the email and send it tonight. Good. And Eleanor, don't talk to any of them without me present. Don't sign anything, don't agree to any meetings, don't engage at all. If they're going that route, everything you say can be used against you. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness for a long time, listening to the house settle, feeling the weight of everything pressing down. My son wanted to have me declared mentally incompetent so he could access my money. My grandson had been expelled and was being sent away. My daughter-in-law was using my grandchildren as weapons. And somehow, I was supposed to be the villain in this story. I thought about calling David. About confronting him with what I knew, demanding an explanation, giving him a chance to tell me it wasn't true, that it was all a misunderstanding. But I already knew the truth. I'd seen it in every interaction since Christmas. He believed he was entitled to my money. He believed my boundaries were a tax. He believed that I existed to serve his needs, and when I stopped serving them, I became the enemy. There was no conversation to have. No explanation that would change anything. I went to my office and started documenting everything. Every text message, every phone call, every threat, every manipulation. I printed out bank statements showing the years of financial support. I wrote down dates and times and exact quotes as best I could remember them. I photographed the email from Theodore Walsh. If they wanted to paint me as incompetent, they were going to discover that this incompetent old woman kept impeccable records. Around midnight, I checked on Sophia one more time. She was still sleeping peacefully, her face relaxed in a way that made her look even younger than 10. This child deserved better. They all did, Sophia and Emma and even Aidan, though he'd gone too far down the wrong path to turn back easily. They deserved parents who put their needs above their own egos. They deserved stability and consistency and adults who modeled healthy behavior instead of entitlement and cruelty. They deserved what I couldn't give them, a functional family. But I could give them something else. I could give them a grandmother who refused to enable their parents' dysfunction, who set boundaries and maintained them, who showed them, through actions if not words, that it was possible to say no, to demand respect, to walk away from people who hurt you even when it cost you everything. Maybe that was worth something. Maybe it was enough. I went to bed that night with a child sleeping safely in my house and a plan forming in my mind. Monday morning, I would see my lawyer. I would make sure every document was bulletproof. I would prepare for a fight I never wanted but wouldn't back down from. And then I would get on that plane to Ireland and I would live my life. Because that was the thing they couldn't seem to understand. I wasn't punishing them by setting boundaries. I wasn't trying to control them by refusing to be controlled. I was just finally, after 63 years, learning to choose myself. And if that made me the villain in their story, so be it. I'd rather be the villain in someone else's story than the victim in my own. Sunday evening arrived too quickly. Sophia and I spent the weekend in a bubble of normalcy, breakfast together, walks around the property, more baking, old movies, and long conversations about everything except her family situation. She helped me work in the garden, digging up the old flower beds I'd neglected for years, planning what we'd plant in the spring. "Will you still let me come visit when everything is growing?" she asked, dirt under her fingernails, hope in her voice. "Anytime you want," I promised, even though I didn't know if I'd be able to keep that promise. When Jessica's car pulled into the driveway at 6 o'clock, Sophia's whole body tensed. The peace that had settled over her during the weekend evaporated in an instant, replaced by the hunched shoulders and wary eyes of a child walking back into a war zone. "I don't want to go," she whispered. "I know, sweetheart. But your mother is still your mother, and she needs you home. Can't I just stay here? Please? I'll be good, I'll help with everything, I won't be any trouble." "You're never any trouble." And this will always be a safe place for you. But right now, you need to go home. Jessica didn't come to the door. Just sat in her car, engine running, staring straight ahead. I walked Sophia out, carrying her backpack, my hand on her shoulder. "Thank you for this weekend, Grandma," Sophia said, and then she hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "I love you. I love you too. So much." Jessica's window rolled down. "Are we done here? I have things to do." I opened the back door and helped Sophia in, buckling her seatbelt even though she was old enough to do it herself. Then I looked at Jessica, really looked at her for the first time in months. She looked exhausted. Thin in a way that wasn't healthy. Her makeup couldn't quite hide the dark circles under her eyes or the new lines around her mouth. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tight her knuckles were white. This was a woman barely holding it together. I felt something unexpected. Pity. "Jessica," I said quietly, "if you need help." "I don't need anything from you." I wasn't talking about money. I meant if you need someone to talk to, or if the girls need a break from everything that's happening. "Stop. Just stop." Her voice cracked. "You don't get to play the concerned grandmother now. You did this. You started all of this. We were fine before you decided to punish us for one stupid incident. You weren't fine. You were barely functional, living beyond your means, raising children without boundaries. I didn't create those problems, Jessica. I just stopped enabling them." "Fuck you," she said, and her voice was ice. "Fuck you and your self-righteous boundaries and your psychological analysis. You're not a therapist. You're not a saint. You're just a bitter old woman who couldn't stand seeing her son happy." From the backseat, I heard Sophia start to cry. "Drive safely," I said, and stepped back from the car. Jessica peeled out of my driveway fast enough to leave skid marks. I stood there long after the taillights disappeared, feeling hollowed out. Then I went inside, locked the door, and let myself cry. For Sophia, for the grandchildren I was losing, for the family that had never really been whole to begin with. Oliver rubbed against my legs, purring, grounding me back in the present. I picked him up and buried my face in his fur. "It's just you and me now, buddy," I whispered. He purred louder, like that was all the answer I needed. Monday morning arrived cold and grey. I dressed carefully for my appointment with Mark, the navy suit I used to wear to parent-teacher conferences, pearls, low heels. The armor of a professional woman who had her life together. "Fake it till you make it," my mother used to say. Mark's office was in downtown Fairfield, in one of those renovated historical buildings with 2 narrow staircases and creaking floorboards. His assistant offered me coffee that I accepted but didn't drink, just held onto like a lifeline while I waited. "Eleanor." Mark appeared in the doorway, his expression grave. "Come in." His office was all dark wood and leather, walls lined with law books that probably nobody had touched since the internet became a thing. He gestured to a chair across from his massive desk and sat down heavily. "I reviewed everything you sent me," he said without preamble. "The email from Theodore Walsh, your financial records, the timeline of events. And Eleanor, I need to be straight with you, this is serious." My stomach clenched. "How serious?" "The legal precedent for what they're attempting exists. Adult children successfully petition for guardianship or conservatorship of elderly parents more often than you'd think. And the fact that you've made significant life changes recently, selling your house, changing your will, cutting off financial support to family, those can all be framed as evidence of declining mental capacity, especially if they can find a doctor willing to testify to that effect. But I'm not mentally declining. I'm making rational choices based on how I've been treated. I know that. You know that. But in court, it's about what we can prove and what narrative is more compelling. They'll argue that you've become paranoid, isolated yourself, are making erratic financial decisions. They'll paint your boundaries as delusions of persecution. So what do? We build an ironclad case for your competency. I've already scheduled you for a comprehensive psychological evaluation with Dr. Patricia Morrison. She's the best neuropsychologist in the state, and her testimony is considered gold standard in these cases. We'll need cognitive testing, personality assessments, the whole 9 yards. We'll also document your current life, your volunteer work, your social connections, your ability to manage your finances and healthcare independently. When? She can see you day after tomorrow. In the meantime, I'm filing a preemptive motion with the probate court, establishing your competency before they can challenge it. We're going on offense, not defense. And I'm drafting an ironclad advanced directive and durable power of attorney, naming someone other than David to make decisions if you ever do become incapacitated. Who would I name? I don't have anyone else. Mark leaned back in his chair. What about Carol? Your friend from book club? Carol. The suggestion surprised me. I've only known her for 3 years. But you trust her? I thought about Carol's kitchen, the countless cups of tea, the hours of conversation. I thought about how she'd listened without judgment when I told her everything, how she'd shown up for me when no one else had. Yes, I said. I trust her. Then that's who we'll name. She doesn't have to manage your finances or healthcare decisions right now. You're fully capable of doing that yourself. But if something happens, she'll be the one making those calls, not David. We spent the next hour going over details, signing documents, building the fortress that would protect me from my own son. When we finished, Mark walked me to the door. Eleanor, I need to ask you something, and I want you to really think about your answer. Okay. Is there any part of you that wants to reconcile with David? Any scenario where you'd consider going back to the way things were? I didn't even have to think about it. No. Good. Because if this goes to court, it's going to get ugly. They're going to dig up everything they can to paint you as unfit. They're going to twist every interaction, every choice you've made. They're going to try to destroy you publicly. And you need to be prepared for that. I'm prepared. He studied my face. Yeah. I think you are. I went home and called Carol. I need to ask you something weird, I said when she answered. Those are my favorite kind of questions. If something happens to me, if I have a stroke or get dementia or become incapable of making my own decisions, would you be willing to be my healthcare proxy and power of attorney? Silence. Then, Eleanor, what's going on? I told her everything. About Theodore Walsh's email, about David's plans, about the legal battle that was probably coming. Those bastards, she said when I finished. Those absolute bastards. Of course I'll do it. I'm honored you'd trust me with that responsibility. But Eleanor, you need to understand something. If it comes to that, if they actually take you to court, you're not going through it alone. I'll be there. Every hearing, every meeting, every step of the way. My eyes burned. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. You'd do the same for me. I would. Then it's settled. You and me against the world. Or at least against your jackass son and his pretentious father-in-law. I laughed despite everything. Thank you, Carol. That's what friends are for. Real friends, not the kind who only show up when they need money. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet house and felt something shift. For months, I'd been operating under the assumption that cutting off David meant cutting off everyone, that choosing myself meant choosing loneliness. But that wasn't true. I had Carol. I had Patricia from art class. I had the library volunteers and the yoga instructor and the woman at the coffee shop who always remembered my order. I had a life that existed independent of my son and his family. I had community. And that was worth fighting for. Wednesday morning, I arrived at Dr. Patricia Morrison's office at 9 o'clock sharp. The waiting room was deliberately calming, soft colors, classical music, nature scenes on the walls. I filled out paperwork, answered preliminary questions, tried not to think about what would happen if I somehow failed these tests. Dr. Morrison was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, with kind eyes and a direct manner that I immediately appreciated. Mrs. Whitmore, I want to explain what we're doing today and why. This assessment has 2 purposes: to establish your current cognitive functioning and to determine whether you're capable of making informed decisions about your life and finances. We'll do memory tests, problem-solving tasks, personality questionnaires. It's comprehensive, and it will take most of the day. Do you have any questions before we begin? Just one. What happens if I fail? You're not going to fail. This isn't a pass-fail test. We're documenting where you are right now, cognitively and psychologically. And based on everything I've reviewed already, your coherent history, your logical decision-making, your ability to manage complex financial and social situations, I'm not concerned about your competency. But we need to document it formally, so no one can challenge it later. We worked for 4 hours with only short breaks. Memory tests where I had to recall lists of words. puzzles and pattern recognition. Questions about my life, my choices, my relationships. Depression and anxiety screenings. Personality inventories. By the end, I was exhausted. How did I do? I asked. Dr. Morrison smiled. Off the record? You did great. Your cognitive functioning is well above average for your age. Your memory is sharp. Your reasoning is sound. And your emotional responses to the situation with your family are entirely appropriate. You're not paranoid or delusional, you're reacting rationally to genuinely difficult circumstances. I'll have the formal report ready in a week, but I can tell you right now, you are fully competent to make your own decisions, and I'll testify to that if necessary. I felt the tension I'd been carrying for days finally release. Thank you. Eleanor. May I call you Eleanor? Please. I do this kind of assessment frequently, often in situations where family members are fighting over control of an elderly person. And I want you to know, what you're doing, setting boundaries with family members who treat you poorly, that's not mental illness. That's mental health. You're choosing yourself, maybe for the first time in your life. That's not crazy. That's brave. I left her office with tears streaming down my face and hope blooming in my chest. That night, I did something I'd been putting off. I called the therapeutic boarding school where Aidan had been sent. Riverside Academy, a pleasant voice answered. Hello, my name is Eleanor Whitmore. My grandson, Aidan Whitmore, was recently enrolled. I'm wondering if you could tell me about your family involvement policies. Are you listed as an approved contact? I'm not sure. Let me check. Typing sounds. I'm sorry, Mrs. Whitmore, but you're not listed as an approved visitor or contact. I can't release any information about Aidan without parental permission. I understand. Can you tell me, hypothetically, if someone wanted to fund a student's tuition anonymously, would that be possible? A pause. That would be between you and our financial office. I can transfer you. The financial office was more helpful. Yes, they could accept anonymous donations to fund specific students. Yes, it could be set up so that the family never knew where the money was coming from. Yes, I could attach conditions, that the student complete the full program, that progress reports be sent to me quarterly, that the family couldn't withdraw him early without forfeiting the funding. Our program costs $48,000 for the remainder of this year and $65,000 for next year if Aidan needs to continue, the administrator explained. It's intensive therapy combined with education, and our success rate with children who complete the program is around 70%. $113,000 to give my grandson a chance at becoming a decent human being. I'll do it, I said. But I have conditions. We spent 30 minutes working out the details. The money would be placed in an irrevocable trust, released only if Aidan completed each phase of the program. David and Jessica would be told only that a private donor concerned about Aidan's welfare had funded his placement. They wouldn't know it was me. Why anonymous? The administrator asked. Because this isn't about them. It's about giving a child a chance that his parents can't or won't provide. And because if they knew it was me, they'd either refuse it or see it as proof that they can manipulate me into giving them what they want. This way, Aidan gets the help he needs, and his parents can't use it against me. That's very generous and very wise. After I hung up, I sat at my desk with my checkbook open, staring at the amount. $113,000. More than twice what I'd spent on David's entire undergraduate education. A fortune that could fund my own retirement travels for years. But this wasn't about the money. It had never been about the money. It was about a 12-year-old boy who'd been failed by every adult in his life, including me. I couldn't undo the damage that had been done. I couldn't force his parents to parent better. I couldn't erase the trauma he'd caused other children. But I could give him this chance. And maybe, somewhere down the line, he'd become someone who looked back at this moment and understood. Understood that love isn't about enabling or excusing. It's about wanting better for someone even when they hate you for it. I wrote the check and put it in the mail before I could change my mind. Then I packed my suitcase for Ireland. 5 more days. The days before my island trip passed in a strange suspended state, like I was living underwater. Everything felt muted, distant, not quite real. I went through the motions, yoga on Tuesday, painting on Thursday, library volunteering on Saturday, but my mind was already halfway across the Atlantic, imagining green hills and stone cottages and a version of myself who existed independent of all this family drama. I didn't hear from David or Jessica. The silence from them had become a presence of its own, something I'd learned to live with the way you learn to live with chronic pain. It was always there, a dull ache, but I'd stopped expecting it to go away. What I did get was a call from Amanda Liu, the counselor at Ashford. "Mrs. Whitmore, I wanted to update you on something. Tyler Rodriguez, the student Aiden was bullying, I've been working with him, and he's been asking about you." My heart squeezed. About me? He knows you're Aiden's grandmother. He knows you stopped paying for Aiden's education. And in his 10-year-old mind, that means you believe him, you're on his side. He wanted me to tell you thank you. I had to sit down. I didn't do it for him. I didn't even know the full extent of what was happening. I know. But the result is the same. Aiden's gone, and Tyler is finally starting to feel safe at school again. He's sleeping through the night. He's participating in class. He's smiling again. Whatever your reasons, you helped save that child's mental health. After we hung up, I cried. Not sad tears exactly, but something more complicated. Relief, maybe. Or grief for all the ways my family had hurt people I'd never even met. Or gratitude that something good had come from all this mess. That afternoon, Carol invited me over for tea, our last visit before my trip. "So," she said, pouring Earl Grey into delicate china cups, "are you excited?" Terrified, actually. Of what? I thought about it. Of liking it too much. Of finding something there that makes me not want to come back. Of discovering that the life I've been living here was just a waste. Eleanor. Carol set down her teacup and fixed me with the look she probably used on students who tried to bullshit their way through book reports. "You're 63 years old. You spent 40 of those years raising a son and teaching other people's children and taking care of a husband and building a life that served everyone but you. You're allowed to want something different now. You're allowed to discover that there's more to life than martyring yourself for people who don't appreciate it." But what if? No. No, what ifs? You're going to Ireland. You're going to drink Guinness in actual Irish pubs and see the countryside your grandmother told you stories about and maybe flirt with a handsome man with an accent. You're going to remember what it feels like to live instead of just existing. And then you're going to come back, or not come back, your choice, and you're going to keep living that way. That's what's going to happen. I laughed despite myself. Flirt with a handsome man. Why not? You're attractive, financially independent, and newly free of family obligations. You're basically a catch. I'm a 63-year-old retired teacher with adult drama and a cat. Exactly. A catch. We spent the rest of the afternoon making plans for what Carol would do with Oliver while I was gone, spoil him rotten, obviously, and talking about all the things I wanted to see and do. By the time I left, I actually felt excited instead of terrified. Maybe Carol was right. Maybe I was allowed to want this. 3 days before my flight, on a Sunday morning while I was reading the newspaper and drinking coffee in my favorite chair, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. For a moment, I considered not answering, letting whoever it was think I wasn't home. But something made me get up and look through the peephole. Emma, my 7-year-old granddaughter, with her blonde curls and gap-toothed smile, standing on my doorstep holding a drawing. Alone. Again. I had the door open in seconds. "Emma. Sweetheart, what are you doing here? Where are your parents?" She looked up at me with eyes exactly like David's had been when he was young, before life made them hard and calculating. "I walked," she said proudly. "You walked? From your house?" She nodded. "It's not that far. Only I don't know. Lots of blocks." My heart stopped. Their house was 3 miles away. 3 miles of busy roads and strangers and all the dangers that a 7-year-old child couldn't possibly understand. "Emma, that's not safe. You can't just walk to someone's house without telling your parents. They must be so worried." "Mom's still asleep. She takes pills now and she sleeps a lot." Sophia was supposed to watch me, but she was on the phone crying to someone about Dad, so I just left. I knelt down to her level, trying to keep my voice calm even though panic was thrilling through me. "Sweetheart, your mom needs to know you're here. Can I call her?" Emma's face crumpled. "Please don't make me go back yet. I just got here. I made you a picture." She held out the drawing, A crayon masterpiece of 2 stick figures, one tall and one small, holding hands under a rainbow. "That's you and me," she explained. "I wanted you to have it for when you go on your trip. Sophia told me you're going far away and maybe not coming back." My throat closed up. "Oh, honey. I'm coming back. It's just a vacation. 2 weeks, and then I'll be right back here. Promise?" "I promise." "Okay." She seemed satisfied with that. "Can I have pancakes? Mom doesn't make breakfast anymore. She says cereal is fine." I called Jessica while Emma sat at my kitchen counter, swinging her legs and chattering about her school and her friends and all the things 7-year-olds talk about when they feel safe. Jessica didn't answer. I tried 3 times before leaving a voicemail. "Jessica, Emma is here with me. She walked here by herself. Please call me back immediately so I know you're aware where she is." No response. I tried David. Voicemail. I tried Jessica again. Nothing. 45 minutes passed. Emma and I made pancakes, chocolate chip, her favorite. She ate 4 of them and told me stories about her teacher and her best friend Mia and the cat she wanted to get, but Mom said they already had too many things to take care of. She didn't mention Aiden being gone. Didn't mention her parents' divorce. Didn't mention anything about the chaos her family was drowning in. She was 7 years old and she just wanted pancakes and someone to listen to her stories. I tried Jessica one more time. This time, she answered. "What?" Her voice was thick, groggy. "Jessica, Emma is here. She walked here by herself. Did you know she left?" Silence. Then, Shit. No, I didn't know. I was sleeping. "When did she, shit?" "About an hour ago. She walked 3 miles, Jessica. Alone. She's 7 years old." I know how old she is. Defensive now, angry. I had a migraine, I took medication. Sophia was supposed to be watching her. Sophia is 11 years old. She can't be responsible for watching her younger sister while you're unconscious in another room. Don't you dare tell me how to parent my children. Don't you fucking dare. Emma looked up at me, her eyes wide. I took the phone into the other room. "I'm not trying to tell you how to parent. But Jessica, this is serious. Emma could have been hurt, or taken, or... Well, she wasn't. She got to your house fine. So I guess it worked out. This time. But what about next time? What if? There won't be a next time because you won't be here. You're leaving for your little vacation, right? Running away from the mess you created. So this isn't your problem anymore. Emma is always going to be my problem. She's my granddaughter. I love her." Funny way of showing it, cutting us off and abandoning us when we need help. I took a breath, steadying myself. "Do you want to come pick her up, or should I bring her home?" "Keep her for the day. I need to sleep this off. I'll get her tonight." "Jessica." But she'd already hung up. I stood in my hallway, phone in hand, trying to process what had just happened. A mother so disconnected from her children that she didn't notice when one of them left the house. A mother so overwhelmed, or medicated, or depressed, or all of the above, that she was willing to leave her 7-year-old with someone she claimed to hate just so she could sleep. A mother who was drowning and refusing every life preserver thrown her way. I went back to the kitchen. Emma had finished her pancakes and was now drawing another picture, humming to herself. "Your mom says you can stay for a while," I told her. Her face lit up. "Really? Can we play a game? Can we make cookies? Can we watch a movie?" "We can do all of those things." We spent the day doing exactly what a grandmother and granddaughter should do. We played board games and made a mess in the kitchen baking snickerdoodles. We watched Moana and sang along to all the songs. Emma showed me the dance routine she'd learned in her after-school program. I taught her how to play Go Fish the way my grandmother had taught me. For a few hours, I could pretend everything was normal. That this was just an ordinary Sunday visit. That Emma's parents were functional adults who would pick her up later with smiles and thank yous. That we were a normal family who loved each other in uncomplicated ways. But at 6 o'clock, when Jessica's car pulled into the driveway, reality came crashing back. Jessica looked worse than she had the last time I'd seen her. Thinner. Grayer. Like something vital inside her had broken and nobody had bothered to fix it. She came to the door this time instead of waiting in the car. Emma, get your stuff, she said without greeting me. But Mom. Now. Emma scurried to gather her backpack and the pictures she'd drawn, her earlier happiness evaporating. She hugged me quickly before heading to the car. Jessica and I stood in the doorway, an ocean of unsaid things between us. She walked 3 miles, I said quietly. She's 7 years old, Jessica. I know. This can't happen again. It won't. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I'm figuring things out. It's been hard since David left. The kids are struggling. I'm struggling. Everything is falling apart and I don't, her voice cracked. I don't know how to fix it. It would have been so easy in that moment to offer help. To say I'd watch the girls more often, that I'd help with expenses, that we could work something out. Every instinct I'd honed over 63 years was screaming at me to fix it, to smooth it over, to sacrifice myself on the altar of family peace. But I'd learned something these past months. Helping people who wouldn't help themselves wasn't kindness. It was enabling. Jessica, I think you need to talk to someone. A therapist. A doctor. Someone who can help you process everything that's happening. She laughed bitterly. With what money? Do you know what David's lawyer is costing? What Aiden's school costs? What it costs just to keep the lights on and food in the fridge? I can't afford therapy. Your health insurance has a deductible we can't meet and co-price we can't afford. But thanks for the suggestion. Very helpful. I stopped myself. You could what? Write another check. Solve all our problems with your money while making sure we know it's your money, that we're dependent on you, that we owe you. Her eyes were bright with tears. That's what you want, isn't it? For us to come crawling back, to admit we can't do it without you, to let you control everything again. That's not what I want. That's never what I wanted. Then what do you want, Eleanor? Tell me. Because I don't understand you. I don't understand how you can watch your family fall apart and just do nothing. What kind of person does that? The question hung in the air between us. What kind of person watches their family implode and doesn't rush in to fix it? The old Eleanor, the one who existed before Christmas dinner, would have crumbled at that accusation. Would have internalized it, believed it, let the guilt drive her back into the pattern of rescue and enabling. But the new Eleanor, the one who'd learned that self-sacrifice wasn't the same as love, had a different answer. The kind of person who knows the difference between helping and enabling, I said quietly. You and David created this situation. You lived beyond your means, you failed to set boundaries with your children, you took my generosity for granted while treating me with contempt. And now you're facing the natural consequences of those choices. Me writing you another check won't change any of that. It'll just postpone the moment when you have to actually deal with your problems. Easy for you to say when you're not the one drowning. You're right. It is easy for me to say because I'm not the one who chose to buy a vacation home I couldn't afford, or private school I couldn't pay for, or a lifestyle that required someone else's money to maintain. Those were your choices, Jessica. Not mine. She stared at me for a long moment, her face cycling through emotions I couldn't read. Then she turned and walked back to her car without another word. I watched them drive away, Emma's small face pressed against the window, looking back at me, and I felt the grief of it settle deep in my bones. I was losing them. Maybe I'd already lost them. But I wasn't wrong to let them go. Monday morning, I went to the bank and withdrew the cash I'd need for my trip. Euros, crisp and foreign feeling in my hands. I stopped by Carol's to drop off Oliver and his supplies. Enough food and litter and toys to last a month, even though I'd only be gone 2 weeks. Just in case, I said. In case of what? In case I like it so much I stay longer. Carol smiled. I hope you do. I hope you find whatever you're looking for over there. What if I don't know what I'm looking for? Then I hope you find it anyway. Tuesday, I packed. Not just for 2 weeks, but carefully, thoughtfully, like I was packing for a different life. I brought comfortable shoes for walking and nice dresses for dinners. I brought my grandmother's rosary, even though I hadn't been to church in years. I brought a journal Carol had given me, its pages blank and waiting. I brought the drawing Emma had made me, the 2 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. Wednesday morning, the day before my flight, I woke to 17 missed calls and 12 text messages. All from David. My stomach dropped. Something was wrong. I listened to the first voicemail. Mom, it's me. Call me back as soon as you get this. It's important. The second, Mom, seriously, I need to talk to you. It's about the kids. The third, why aren't you answering? I know you have your phone. This is serious, Mom. Call me. They progressed from irritated to angry to almost frantic. The last one, left at 2:47 a.m., fine. Don't call me back. But you should know that Jessica has been hospitalized. Accidental overdose. They think it was the migraine medication mixed with the anxiety pills. The girls are at Jessica's parents' house and they're talking about petitioning for custody. So thanks for that. Thanks for abandoning us when we needed you most. I hope your fucking vacation is worth it. My hands shook as I set the phone down. Jessica had overdosed. The girls were with Jessica's parents, Theodore and Margaret Walsh, who I'd met twice and who treated everyone outside their tax bracket like servants. And David was blaming me. Of course he was blaming me. I made coffee with trembling hands. Sat at my kitchen table. Stared at nothing. This wasn't my fault. I repeated it to myself like a mantra. This wasn't my fault. Jessica's choices, to take too many pills, to not get help, to let everything spiral out of control. Those were her choices. Not mine. David's choices, to enable his son's behavior, to live beyond his means, to blame everyone but himself, those were his choices. Not mine. But the guilt came anyway, crushing and familiar, whispering that if I'd just helped more, given more, been more, maybe this wouldn't have happened. I picked up my phone to call David back. Put it down. Picked it up again. My finger hovered over his name in my contacts. Then I called Mark instead. Eleanor, everything okay? My daughter-in-law overdosed. She's in the hospital. My son left me 17 messages blaming me for it. And I'm supposed to fly to Ireland tomorrow and I don't know what to do. Silence for a moment. Then, is Jessica's life in danger? I don't think so. David said it was accidental, and he sounded angry, not devastated, so. Is there anything you being there would change? Any way you being present would improve the situation? I thought about it honestly. No. If anything, it would make it worse. David would use it as an opportunity to manipulate me. Jessica's parents already hate me. And the girls are probably better off where they are than in the middle of whatever war zone their parents' house has become. Then you know what I'm going to say. Go to Ireland. Go to Ireland. You didn't cause this, Eleanor. You're not responsible for fixing it. And you're certainly not required to sacrifice your own life and well-being to serve as an emotional support system for people who treat you terribly. But what if? No, what ifs. We've been down this road. You've set boundaries. You're maintaining them. That's healthy. That's good. Don't let someone else's crisis become your emergency, especially when that crisis was caused by choices they made against your advice. After we hung up, I sat with my coffee and my guilt and the 17 accusatory voicemails I hadn't listened to yet. Then I made a decision. I called the hospital directly, asked for Jessica's room. A nurse answered and told me she was stable, sedated, and would likely be released in a day or two once they were sure the overdose was accidental and not a suicide attempt. Can I leave a message for her? I asked. Of course. Please tell her that Eleanor called to check on her. Tell her I hope she gets the help she needs. And tell her that my offer stands. If she ever wants to talk, really talk, I'm here. Then I called Theodore Walsh. He answered on the first ring. Eleanor. I wondered when you'd call. I heard about Jessica. I wanted to check on the girls. The girls are fine. They're with us, where they should be. We're filing for emergency custody. David is in no state to care for them, and Jessica obviously can't. I see. I'll be frank with you, Eleanor. This is partially your fault. Your selfish decision to cut off funding created a cascade of stress that led directly to this situation. Jessica was struggling with anxiety and depression because of financial pressures that you could have alleviated with a simple check. Instead, you chose your pride over your family's well-being. I'd expected this. Prepared for it, even. But it still hurt. Mr. Walsh, with respect, Jessica was struggling because she and David made financial choices they couldn't sustain. My money was enabling those choices, not fixing the underlying problem. If anything, continuing to fund their lifestyle would have delayed this crisis, not prevented it. That's a convenient rationalization for abandonment. It's not abandonment to refuse to be used. And it's not my responsibility to bankroll your daughter's mental health at the expense of my own. We'll see what a judge says about that. When this custody case goes to court, your behavior will be documented. Your refusal to help family in crisis. Your pattern of financial manipulation. It will all be part of the record. Then I suppose I'll see you in court, Mr. Walsh. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking. My heart was racing. Every part of me wanted to cave, to apologize, to offer to help in whatever way they needed just to make this feeling stop. But I didn't. Instead, I finished packing my suitcase. I triple-checked my passport and boarding pass. I set up an auto-reply on my email. I'm traveling and will have limited access to communication. For emergencies, please contact Carol Brennan at her number. And I went to bed early, because tomorrow I had a flight to catch. Tomorrow, I was choosing myself. Tomorrow, I was going to Ireland. And whatever happened while I was gone, whatever crisis erupted, whatever blame was assigned, whatever consequences came from my choice to live my own life, I would deal with it when I got back. If I got back. Because maybe Carol was right. Maybe I would find something in Ireland that made me want to stay. Maybe I'd discover that the life I'd been living here was just one option among many, and not even the best one. Maybe I'd learn that it was never too late to start over. I fell asleep that night with Emma's drawing on my nightstand and hope blooming in my chest like something green and new and impossibly fragile. Tomorrow I would fly. The Logan Airport security line moved like cold molasses on a Thursday morning. I stood with my carry-on and my boarding pass, surrounded by business travelers and young families and couples heading off on adventures, and I felt completely alien. Like I was pretending to be someone who traveled, someone who made bold choices, someone who got on planes to foreign countries at 63 years old without looking back. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't look at it. It had been buzzing since 4 a.m., when I'd gotten up to finish my last-minute preparations. David, probably. Or maybe Theodore Walsh. Or maybe Jessica from her hospital bed, calling to tell me that this was all my fault. I didn't want to know. Next, the TSA agent called. I stepped forward, handed over my documents, tried to smile like a normal person who wasn't abandoning her family in crisis to fly across an ocean. Ireland, the agent said, glancing at my boarding pass. Lucky you. My wife and I went last year. Best trip of our lives. I hope mine is too, I said, and meant it. Through security, past the shops selling overpriced water and magazines, to my gate. I had 2 hours before boarding. I bought a coffee I didn't really want and a book I probably wouldn't read and sat down in the uncomfortable airport chairs to wait. My phone buzzed again. This time, I looked. 23 missed calls. 31 text messages. 7 voicemails. I turned the phone off completely and put it in my bag. Whatever was happening at home could wait 6 hours. Could wait until I was on the ground in Ireland. Could wait until I'd had a chance to breathe air that wasn't saturated with guilt and obligation and the weight of other people's choices. A woman sat down next to me, maybe mid-50s, traveling alone, reading a novel with a bright cover. She glanced at me and smiled. First time to Ireland, she asked. How did you know? You have the look. Half excited, half terrified, like you can't believe you're actually doing this. I laughed. That obvious. I had the same look my first solo trip. Divorced at 52, kids grown and gone, woke up one day and realized I'd spent 30 years living for other people and couldn't remember the last time I'd done something just for me. So I booked a flight to Prague and went. Best decision I ever made. Did you go back? Home, I mean. She smiled. Eventually. But not the same person I was when I left. That's the thing about travel. It changes you. Shows you that the life you thought was the only option is actually just one of many. You start to realize that home is a choice, not a prison. We talked for the next hour, about her travels, about her kids who'd been angry at first about her abandonment but eventually came to respect her independence, about the version of herself she discovered in hotel rooms and trains and conversations with strangers who became friends. Do you miss them? I asked. Your kids? Every day. But I also know that the mother who needed their approval for every decision wasn't doing them any favors. I was teaching them that women exist to serve others, that our dreams don't matter, that self-sacrifice is the highest virtue. When I finally started living for myself, they were shocked. Then angry. Then, eventually, they started doing the same thing. My daughter left a job she hated. My son started setting boundaries with his in-laws. I showed them, by example, that it's okay to want more. What if they never come around? What if they just stay angry? She met my eyes. Then I'll still have lived my life. And that has to be enough, because the alternative, living for someone else's approval, that's not living at all. When they called for boarding, she squeezed my hand. Have a wonderful trip. And remember, you're not running away from anything. You're running toward yourself. The flight was long and uncomfortable and perfect. I sat in my window seat. I'd splurged on an upgrade, one of the first purely selfish purchases I'd made in years, and watched America fall away beneath me. The coast disappeared. Then there was just ocean, endless blue-gray water and clouds, and the curved horizon that made the earth look as small and fragile as it actually was. I thought about Emma's drawing in my suitcase. About Sophia's tears. About Aidan in his therapeutic boarding school, probably hating me, probably not understanding that the woman who'd cut off his tuition had also secretly funded his chance at redemption. I thought about David, and tried to remember when exactly I'd lost him. Had it been gradual, years of small compromises and overlooked cruelties adding up? Or had there been a specific moment when my son became someone I didn't recognize? Maybe both. Maybe neither. Maybe it didn't matter anymore. The flight attendant came by with drinks. I ordered wine even though it was barely noon, because I was 63 years old and on an airplane to Ireland and nobody could tell me not to. The woman next to me, a different woman, younger, with headphones on and a laptop open, glanced over and smiled. Celebrating something. My independence, I said. I'll drink to that. We toasted with plastic cups of mediocre wine somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, and I felt something inside me not just a little bit. I must have dozed off eventually, because the next thing I knew, the pilot was announcing our descent into Dublin. Ireland appeared beneath us like something from a postcard, impossibly green fields divided by stone walls, clusters of houses with smoke rising from chimneys, the coast all rocky and dramatic and ancient-looking. My heart did something complicated in my chest. This was real. I was actually here. I'd actually done it. The landing was smooth. Customs was efficient. My luggage appeared on the carousel without incident. And then I was walking out into the arrivals area of Dublin Airport, jet-lagged and rumpled and more awake than I'd felt in months. I'd rented a car, something small and economical because I'd be driving on the wrong side of the road and I didn't trust myself with anything bigger. The rental agent was patient with my nervous questions, showed me how everything worked, wished me a lovely stay. First time in Ireland? He asked. Yes. Ah, you'll love it. We're very friendly to Americans here. And if you get lost, just ask anyone. We'll either help you or tell you a story long enough that you'll forget you were lost in the first place. I laughed and took the keys and found my car and sat in the driver's seat for a full 5 minutes, trying to convince myself I could do this. I could drive on the left side of the road. I could navigate narrow lanes and roundabouts and towns with names I couldn't pronounce. I could find my way to the cottage I'd rented sight unseen based on nothing but photos and hope. I could do this. I turned on my phone long enough to load the GPS directions, then turned it off again before any messages could come through. Then I took a breath, said a prayer to no one in particular, and pulled out of the parking space. The drive to Cork took 3 hours, partially because I drove too slowly and partially because I kept stopping to stare at things. Stone walls that were older than my entire country. Castles crumbling picturesquely on hillsides. Sheep, so many sheep, grazing in fields so green they looked fake. Everything smelled different. Felt different. The air was softer somehow, damper, carrying hints of sea salt and peat and growing things. I got lost twice despite the GPS. The second time, I pulled over in a tiny village, just a handful of houses and a pub, and asked a woman walking her dog for directions. You're only about a mile off, she said cheerfully. Americans always miss that turn. The sign's too small and it's hidden behind the hedge. Keep going till you see the church with the blue door, then turn right. Can't miss it. I thanked her and started to get back in the car. Lovely spot you're heading to, she called after me. Quiet. Peaceful. Good for thinking. How did you know where I was going? She smiled. Only one rental cottage in that direction that Americans book. Mrs. O'Sullivan's place. You'll love it. She keeps it perfect. Small towns, I thought. Some things were the same everywhere. The cottage, when I finally found it, was exactly as perfect as promised. Stone walls thick enough to last centuries. A thatched roof. Window boxes with flowers I couldn't name. A bright red door that looked like something from a fairy tale. Inside, low ceilings with exposed beams, a fireplace big enough to stand in, furniture that was worn but comfortable, a kitchen with a view of rolling hills that seemed to go on forever. I set my suitcase down in the bedroom, just a bed and a wardrobe and a window that looked out over a garden, and I stood there in the quiet of this foreign place, and I cried. Not sad tears. Not really happy tears either. Just release. All the tension and fear and guilt and anger and grief I'd been carrying for months, maybe years, finally finding its way out. I cried for the family I'd lost. I cried for the woman I'd been, always saying yes, always accommodating, always putting everyone else first. I cried for the years I'd wasted being afraid. And then I stopped crying, washed my face in the tiny bathroom, and went to explore. That first evening in Ireland, I did nothing productive. I didn't unpack properly, didn't check my messages, didn't make plans or schedules or to-do lists. I walked through the garden, touching plants I didn't recognize. I found a bench overlooking the hills and sat there until the sun started to set, painting everything gold and orange and purple. I went into the village, the same one where I'd asked for directions, and found the pub the woman had mentioned. It was called the Wandering Hare, and it was exactly what an Irish pub should be. Dark wood and warm light and the smell of beer and cooking meat and the sound of conversation and laughter. I ordered fish and chips and a pint of Guinness because when in Ireland, right? And I sat at the bar alone, which normally would have made me self-conscious, but here, in this place where nobody knew me, it just felt normal. The bartender, a man about my age with kind eyes and a thick accent, chatted with me while I ate. Asked where I was from, how long I was staying, what I thought of Ireland so far. It's beautiful, I said. More beautiful than I expected. Ah, we get that a lot. Americans come here thinking it'll be quaint and charming, then they realize it's actually magnificent. He topped off my beer without asking. What brings you over? Family history? Vacation? Running away from something? I laughed. Is it that obvious? People don't usually come to rural Cork in March for the weather. You're either chasing something or running from something. Sometimes both. Both, I admitted. Definitely both. Well, you're in the right place for it. Ireland's good for running to. We've got enough space and beauty and whiskey to help you figure out whatever needs figuring out. I stayed at the pub until late, nursing my beer, listening to conversations in accents I had to concentrate to understand, feeling more relaxed than I had in months. When I finally walked back to the cottage, it was only a quarter mile. The sky was full of stars like I'd never seen in Connecticut. No light pollution here. Just darkness and stars and the sound of wind in the grass. I stood in the garden for a long time, looking up, feeling small and significant all at once. Then I went inside, made tea in the unfamiliar kitchen, and sat by the fireplace even though I didn't know how to light it. My phone was still off. My family was still in crisis. My life was still complicated and messy and full of unresolved conflict. But right here, right now, in this cottage in Ireland, I was just Eleanor. Not Mom. Not Grandma. Not the ATM or the enabler or the villain or the victim. Just Eleanor. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, that was enough. The first week in Ireland passed in a blur of green hills and grey skies and the kind of quiet that gets inside your bones. I woke when my body wanted to wake, sometimes early, sometimes not. I ate when I was hungry, scones from the village bakery, cheese and bread from the tiny market, fish and chips from the Wandering Hare. I walked every day, following stone walls and sheep paths to nowhere in particular, getting beautifully, gloriously lost. I didn't turn on my phone. Not the first day. Not the second. Not even by the end of the week. I knew I should. Knew there were probably dozens more messages, more accusations, more crises that I was supposedly responsible for solving. But every time I reached for it, something stopped me. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe I was being cruel. Or maybe, for the first time in my life, I was being healthy. On the fourth day, I drove to Cork City and spent hours wandering the English market, breathing in the smell of fresh bread and smoked fish and flowers. I bought a wool sweater that cost too much and fit perfectly. I had coffee in a cafe where nobody knew me and nobody cared that I was alone. On the 5th day, I hired a guide to help me trace my grandmother's family history. Her name was Siobhan. It's pronounced Siobhan, but don't worry, everyone gets it wrong. And she was a genealogist who specialized in helping Americans find their Irish roots. We drove to the parish where my grandmother had been born, a tiny village called Clonacalty. The church was still there, ancient and beautiful, its graveyard full of headstones with familiar names. O'Connor, my grandmother's maiden name, scattered across 3 centuries of markers. Your people were farmers, Siobhan told me, pointing to the records she'd pulled from the church archive. Tenant farmers, most likely. Life would have been hard. That's why so many left during the famine and after. My grandmother never talked much about it. Just fairy stories and bits of songs. That's how they survived. The stories. The songs. The ability to make beauty out of hardship. Siobhan smiled. You've got strong blood, Eleanor. These were people who survived impossible things. That strength is in you too. I thought about that as we drove back to the cottage. About survival and strength and the ways trauma gets passed down through generations, not just the pain, but the resilience too. My grandmother had left everything she knew at 17 years old and gotten on a boat to America. Had worked as a maid and a seamstress and eventually a factory worker. Had raised 4 children through the Depression. Had lost a husband to a factory accident and kept going anyway. And I'd inherited that strength, whether I'd known it or not. Maybe that's what I was doing now. Not running away. Not giving up. Surviving. On the 7th day, I finally turned on my phone. It took 5 minutes just to load all the notifications. 53 missed calls. 72 text messages. 15 voicemails. I stood in the cottage kitchen, watching the numbers climb, feeling my heart rate spike. Then I made a decision. I didn't listen to the voicemails. Didn't read most of the texts. I scrolled through quickly, looking for anything that indicated a genuine emergency. A death, a serious injury, something that would require me to fly home immediately. Nothing. Just anger and guilt-tripping and demands that I call back right now. The most recent message was from David, sent last night. I don't know why I'm even bothering anymore. You've made it clear where your priorities are. Mom, we needed you and you abandoned us. Again. I hope you're happy with your choice. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I typed a response. I'm safe. I'm well. I'll be home in 1 week. If there's a genuine emergency, you can reach Carol Brennan. Otherwise, I'll contact you when I'm ready. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I turned the phone off again. The second week was different from the first. The novelty of being in Ireland had worn off. The jet lag had faded. The initial euphoria of escape had settled into something quieter, more complicated. I found myself thinking about home more. About Sophia and Emma and whether they were okay. About Aidan in his therapeutic school and whether he was making progress or just getting angrier. About Jessica and whether she'd gotten the help she needed. About David and whether he'd ever understand why I'd done what I'd done. I missed them. God help me, even after everything, I missed them. But I also knew, with a clarity that only distance could provide, that I couldn't go back to the way things were. Couldn't resume my role as the family ATM and emotional dumping ground. Couldn't sacrifice myself on the altar of their dysfunction and call it love. On the 9th day, I met a woman in the village named Margaret. She was maybe 70, with white hair and laugh lines and the kind of face that had seen things but refused to be hardened by them. We started talking in the market. She needed help reaching something on a high shelf. I helped her. She invited me for tea at her house. Her house was small and cluttered and full of photographs. Children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, people at every stage of life. You have a big family, I said. Too big sometimes. She laughed. 7 children. 19 grandchildren. 4 great-grands so far. They're exhausting and expensive and constantly causing drama. I love them all desperately. They're lucky to have you. Am I lucky to have them, though? That's the question, isn't it? She poured tea into mismatched cups. People always say family is everything. But I think that's rubbish. Family is only everything if they treat you like you're something. Otherwise, they're just people who happen to share your blood. You sound like you've thought about this. My oldest son and I didn't speak for 5 years. He wanted money I didn't have, for a business venture that was clearly going to fail. When I said no, he accused me of not believing in him, of playing favorites with his siblings, of being a terrible mother. Cut me off completely. Wouldn't let me see his children. What happened? His business failed, like I knew it would. He lost everything. Came back asking for more money to dig himself out. I said no again. She smiled. But I did offer to help him make a budget, find a job, learn to live within his means. He was furious. Called me controlling. Said I was enjoying watching him suffer. That must have hurt. It did. But I held firm. And you know what? Eventually, he figured it out. Got a job. Paid off his debts. Started living differently. It took 3 years, but he came back and apologized. Really apologized, not just I'm sorry you feel that way, but I was wrong and you were right and I'm grateful you didn't enable my mistakes. You must have been relieved. I was. But here's the thing, I would have been okay either way. I'd made peace with losing him if that's what it took to maintain my boundaries. Because I'd learned something important, you can love someone and still refuse to be destroyed by them. We talked for 3 hours that afternoon. About family and boundaries and the difference between helping and enabling. About the guilt that comes with saying no. About the peace that comes with choosing yourself. When I left, she hugged me tight. Whatever you're running from, Eleanor, and I can see that you're running from something, just make sure you're also running toward something. Otherwise, you're just hiding. What should I be running toward? Yourself. The version of you that exists when you're not performing for anyone else. She's in there somewhere, probably buried under decades of being what everyone else needed you to be. Find her. She's worth knowing. On the 11th day, I rented a bicycle and rode along the coast. The wind was fierce, the hills were brutal, and I wasn't in good enough shape for it. But I did it anyway, pedaling until my legs burned and my lungs ached, stopping at scenic points to stare at the Atlantic Ocean crashing against rocks that had witnessed 1,000 years of storms. I thought about Margaret's question. What was I running toward? Not Ireland, beautiful as it was. This wasn't about geography. Not freedom exactly, though that was part of it. Not even peace, though I craved it. What I was running toward, I realized, was the woman I'd been before I learned to make myself small. Before I learned that love meant sacrifice. Before I learned that being needed was more important than being respected. I was running toward the girl who'd wanted to travel and write and teach and make a difference in the world on her own terms. The girl who'd had dreams that didn't revolve around making other people happy. That girl had gotten lost somewhere along the way, buried under marriage and motherhood and widowhood and the relentless pressure to be everything to everyone. But she was still in there. I could feel her stirring, like something dormant finally getting enough light and water to grow again. On the 12th day, I did something I hadn't done in 40 years. I wrote. Not a grocery list or a thank you note or a check. Real writing. Story writing. The kind I used to do in college before practical concerns took over, before I decided that teaching other people's words was safer than creating my own. I sat at the cottage's small desk with a notebook I'd bought in Cork and a pen that felt strange in my hand, and I wrote about a woman who got on a plane to Ireland and never came back. It was terrible, probably, self-indulgent and melodramatic and full of clichés. But it was mine. For 3 hours, I wrote without stopping, without judging, without worrying about whether it was good enough or useful enough or worth anyone else's time. I wrote for the pure joy of creating something, and when I finally stopped, my hand was cramping and my back was stiff and I felt more alive than I had in decades. On the 13th day, my last full day in Ireland, I drove back to Clonacalty, to the graveyard where my ancestors were buried. I walked among the headstones, reading names and dates, doing the math. So many children who hadn't made it past infancy. So many young mothers. So many hard lives condensed into 2 lines carved in stone. I found my great-great-grandmother's grave. Mary O'Connor, 1840 to 1892. She would have lived through the famine. Would have seen neighbors starve. Would have watched her own children leave for America, knowing she'd probably never see them again. She'd been 52 when she died. Younger than I was now. What would she think of me? I wondered. Of her descendant who had so much, education, freedom, money, choices, and had spent most of her life too afraid to use any of it. I sat on the ground next to her grave, not caring that the grass was wet, not caring that I probably looked crazy. I'm sorry I wasted so much time, I said out loud. I'm sorry I forgot that you survived impossible things so that I could have the luxury of choosing. But I'm trying now. I'm finally trying. The wind picked up, rustling through the trees. It sounded almost like an answer. I stayed there for a long time, talking to ghosts, making promises to myself, crying and laughing and feeling every complicated emotion all at once. When I finally stood up, my jeans were soaked and my face was probably a mess, but I felt lighter, unburdened, ready. That night, I went to the Wandering Hare one last time. The same bartender was there, Sean. I'd learned his name was over the past 2 weeks. He smiled when I walked in. Last night with us? He asked. How did you know? You've got the look. People get it there last night in Ireland. Already half goodbye. I ordered a Guinness and the shepherd's pie and sat at the bar, listening to the conversations flowing around me. A group of old men arguing about football. A young couple laughing over shared appetizers. A woman my age sitting alone at a corner table, reading a book and occasionally smiling at whatever she was reading. I could be that woman, I thought. The woman alone with her book, comfortable in her solitude, content with her own company. Maybe I already was. Sean set my food down and leaned against the bar. So, did you find what you came here for? I don't know. What do you think I came here for? Most Americans who come alone to Ireland are either looking for their roots or looking for themselves. Sometimes both. And if I told you I was looking for myself, then I'd ask if you found her. I thought about it. About the woman who'd arrived 2 weeks ago, terrified and guilty and still half believing she was the villain in her family's story. About the woman sitting here now, who'd walked miles of Irish hills and traced her ancestry and written terrible stories and made peace with ghosts. I think I'm starting to, I said. Good. That's all any of us can do, really. Keep starting to find ourselves. Over and over. Every day. We talked for another hour, about Ireland and America, about family and solitude, about the ways life surprises you when you're brave enough to let it. When I finally paid my bill and stood to leave, Sean reached across the bar and shook my hand. Safe travels, Eleanor. And remember, you're always welcome back. Ireland has a way of calling people home, even people who've never lived here. I'll remember. I walked back to the cottage under a sky full of stars, breathing in the cool night air, memorizing the feeling of this place, this moment, this version of myself that I'd found here. Tomorrow I'd fly home. Tomorrow I'd face whatever consequences waited for me. Tomorrow I'd have to figure out how to maintain these boundaries, this peace, this hard-won sense of self in the chaos of real life. But tonight, I was just here. Just Eleanor. Just enough. I spent my last morning packing slowly, cleaning the cottage, leaving it exactly as I'd found it. Before I left, I took Emma's drawing out of my suitcase, the one with the 2 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow, and propped it on the kitchen counter where I could see it. I took a photo of it with my phone. Then I wrote a letter. Dear Emma, Sophia, and Aidan. I'm writing this from Ireland, a place I've wanted to visit my whole life but never had the courage to go until now. I'm sitting in a cottage with a thatched roof, looking at hills so green they don't seem real, thinking about you 3 and wondering what kind of adults you'll become. I want you to know something important. The choices I've made, stopping the money, setting boundaries, taking this trip, none of it was about punishing you or your parents. It was about teaching you something I wish someone had taught me when I was young. You are not responsible for other people's happiness. You are not required to sacrifice yourself to keep peace. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Those lessons took me 63 years to learn. I hope you learn them sooner. I hope you grow up knowing that love and respect go together, that boundaries are healthy, that choosing yourself isn't selfish. I hope you remember that your grandmother loved you enough to let you see what real love looks like. Not enabling, not fixing, not rescuing, but holding space for people to become their best selves, even when it's hard. I'll see you when you're ready to see me. Not before. With all my love. Grandma Eleanor. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my suitcase. I didn't know if I'd ever send it. Didn't know if they'd ever understand. But I'd written it. And that was enough. I turned on my phone for the drive to the airport. Let it load all the new messages, 23 more since I'd last checked, and ignored them all. Instead, I called Carol. Eleanor. Thank God. I've been worried. I'm fine. Better than fine. I'm good, Carol. You sound different. I feel different. I'm coming home today. Landing around 7 tonight. Can you pick me up? Of course. Eleanor, you should know, things here have been complicated. Tell me on the drive home. Right now, I just want to finish being here before I have to deal with there. Fair enough. See you tonight. The drive to Dublin felt shorter than it had 2 weeks ago. I navigated the roundabouts with more confidence, remembered to stay left, even enjoyed the winding roads and stone walls and sheep in fields. At the airport, I returned the rental car, checked my bag, went through security. At the gate, waiting to board, I finally listened to one voicemail. Just one. The most recent, from yesterday. It was Sophia. Grandma, it's me. I don't know if you're getting these messages, but I wanted to tell you that I'm okay. Me and Emma both. We're staying with Mom's parents and it's not great but it's not terrible either. They're kind of stuffy and they don't let us have dessert every night, but they're not mean or anything. Mom's out of the hospital. She's staying at a place for people who need help with their feelings. She'll be there for a month. Dad says she had a nervous breakdown, but I looked it up and I think it's more like she just needed time to get better without all the stress. Aidan's still away at school. Dad says he might get to come home for Easter if he does good there. I miss you, Grandma. I know everyone is mad at you, but I'm not. I think you did what you had to do. I read something in health class about boundaries and how they're important for mental health. I think that's what you were doing. Setting boundaries. Anyway, I hope Ireland is nice. I hope you're having fun. I hope you remember that some of us still love you, even when everything is complicated. Okay. Bye. I sat in the airport gate area with tears streaming down my face, listening to my 11-year-old granddaughter demonstrate more emotional maturity than most of the adults in her life. She understood. Maybe they all wouldn't. Maybe David would stay angry forever. Maybe Jessica would blame me from her treatment center. Maybe Aidan would grow up believing I'd abandoned him. But Sophia understood. And that was enough to hold on to. I boarded the plane, found my seat, buckled in for the long flight home. The woman next to me, older, weathered, with an Irish accent, smiled. Going home or leaving it? Both, I said. Definitely both. She nodded like that made perfect sense. Ireland does that to people. Changes them. Makes them see things differently. You'll never be quite the same as you were before you came. Good, I said. And I meant it. As the plane lifted off, I looked out the window at Ireland growing smaller beneath me. The green fields and stone walls and tiny villages and the coast where waves had been crashing for millennia. I'd come here looking for escape. I was leaving with something better. Myself. Finally, completely, unapologetically myself. And whatever waited for me at home, whatever battles I'd have to fight, whatever relationships I'd have to navigate, whatever consequences I'd face for choosing myself, I'd face them as this woman. This Eleanor. The one who walked Irish hills and wrote bad stories and made peace with her ancestors. The one who finally understood that she was worth fighting for. The plane broke through the clouds into blue sky and sunshine. I closed my eyes and breathed. Home was waiting. But so was I. Logan Airport looked exactly the same as it had 2 weeks ago, and I felt like a completely different person. I collected my luggage, navigated through customs, and walked out into the arrivals area where Carol was waiting with a handmade sign that said "Welcome Home, World Traveler," in glittery letters. I laughed for the first time in hours and let her pull me into a hug. "You look amazing," she said, holding me at arm's length to study my face. Rested. Clear. Like you've been doing something other than worrying for the first time in decades. I have been. Good. Come on, let's get you home. We have a lot to talk about. In the car, Carol filled me in on everything I'd missed. Jessica was still in residential treatment, a facility in Massachusetts that specialized in trauma and addiction. She'd be there for at least another 2 weeks, possibly longer. David had moved into a rental apartment. The house was in Jessica's name, a fact that had come out during the divorce proceedings and that he was apparently furious about. Sophia and Emma were still with Theodore and Margaret Walsh. David had visitation every weekend, but the emergency custody petition was moving forward. There would be a hearing in 3 weeks. Aidan was still at Riverside Academy. According to what Carol had heard through the grapevine, apparently Theodore Walsh was friends with someone who knew someone at Carol's church. He was struggling but making some progress. And David had consulted with 3 different lawyers about contesting my mental competency. All 3 told him he didn't have a case, Carol said. Especially after Mark filed the preemptive motion and submitted Dr. Morrison's evaluation. You're too obviously competent, Eleanor. You've got documentation of everything, witnesses to your sound decision-making, proof of your active social life. One of the lawyers apparently told David straight out that pursuing this would make him look vindictive and could hurt him in the custody battle. So he dropped it. For now. But Eleanor, Theodore Walsh is still making noise. He's got money and connections and apparently a personal vendetta against you. You need to be prepared for him to try something else. I nodded, absorbing all of this. 2 weeks ago, this information would have sent me spiraling. Would have made me want to fix everything, smooth everything over, sacrifice myself to make the problems go away. Now, I just felt tired. What about Oliver? I asked, changing the subject. Carol's face lit up. Oh, he's wonderful. He's been sleeping in my bed every night and I'm going to miss him terribly when you take him back. Maybe we can arrange shared custody. Don't tempt me. I'm this close to adopting a cat of my own. We drove through familiar streets, past the market where I shopped, the library where I volunteered, the yoga studio where I'd been going on Tuesdays. Everything looked the same, but I saw it differently now. This was my town. My community. My life that existed completely independent of my family drama. I'd built this. Slowly, over the past few months. And no matter what happened with David and Jessica and the kids, I'd still have this. Are you ready to face whatever comes next? Carol asked as we pulled into my driveway. I looked at my house, too big, too empty, too full of memories, but mine nonetheless. I don't know, I admitted. But I'm not running away from it anymore. That has to count for something. It counts for everything. That night, alone in my house with Oliver purring in my lap, I finally read through all the messages I'd been avoiding. Most were exactly what I'd expected. Anger from David. Guilt trips from Jessica's parents. Demands that I call back immediately, that I explain myself, that I fix what I'd supposedly broken. But there were other messages too. One from Amanda Liu at Ashford, checking in and letting me know that Tyler Rodriguez was doing much better. One from Riverside Academy, thanking me for the anonymous donation and updating me that Aiden had completed his first phase of treatment successfully. One from Patricia, my art teacher, asking if I'd like to display some of my paintings in the community center's spring show. One from the library director, asking if I'd consider leading a summer reading program for elementary students. Messages that reminded me I was more than just my family's problems. I was a teacher, an artist, a volunteer, a friend. I was Eleanor Whitmore, and I had value beyond what I could give other people. I also had one message from Sophia, sent this morning. Grandma, Dad told me you're coming home today. Can I call you tomorrow? I really want to talk to you. I miss you so much. I wrote back immediately, I miss you too, sweetheart. Call me anytime. I love you. Then I poured myself a glass of wine, sat in my favorite chair, and thought about what came next. Sophia called the next morning at 9 o'clock. Grandma. Her voice was bright with relief. You're really home. I really am. How was Ireland? Was it amazing? Did you see castles? Did you meet Irish people? Did you? Sophia, breathe. I laughed. It was wonderful. I'll tell you all about it sometime. How are you doing? Her enthusiasm dimmed. I'm okay. Grandpa Theodore is really strict and Grandma Margaret is kind of cold, but they make sure we go to school and eat healthy food and stuff. It's not like home, but it's okay. And your mom? I haven't seen her since she went to the hospital. Dad says she needs time to focus on getting better. He visits her on Tuesdays. And your dad? How is he? A pause. He's really mad, Grandma. At you, at Mom, at Grandpa Theodore, at everyone. He keeps saying everything is everyone else's fault and nothing is ever his fault. It makes me tired. My heart broke for this child who had to navigate her father's emotional immaturity. Sophia, I need you to hear something. None of this is your fault. Not the divorce, not Aiden being away, not the fighting between the adults. You didn't cause any of it, and you can't fix any of it. Your only job is to be 11 years old and do your schoolwork and spend time with your friends. Okay. That's what the counselor at school says too. You're seeing a counselor? Grandpa Theodore set it up. He said with everything going on, we should talk to someone. It's actually kind of nice. She lets me say whatever I want and she doesn't judge. I'm glad you have that support. We talked for another 20 minutes, about school, about Emma, about the art project Sophia was working on for class. Normal things. Kid things. It felt like the first normal conversation I'd had with any of my family in months. Before we hung up, Sophia said, Grandma, can I tell you something? Anything. I'm glad you went to Ireland. I'm glad you did something for yourself. Dad keeps saying you're selfish, but I don't think wanting to be happy is selfish. I think it's brave. I had to swallow 3 times before I could speak. Thank you, sweetheart. That means more than you know. When this is all over, when Mom is better and Dad calms down and everything is settled, can I come visit you? Just me and you? No drama, just like we had that weekend. I would love nothing more. After we hung up, I sat with my phone in my hand and let myself hope. Maybe I wouldn't lose them all. Maybe Sophia and Emma would grow up understanding what I'd done and why. Maybe they'd even thank me for it someday. 3 days after I got home, David showed up at my door. I saw him through the window before he knocked, sitting in his car for a full 5 minutes, apparently working up the courage. When he finally approached, I almost didn't answer. But running away wasn't the answer anymore. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. Hi, Mom. David. We stood there awkwardly, the threshold between us feeling like a canyon. Can we talk? He finally asked. We're talking now. Inside, please. I hesitated, then stepped aside. He came in, looking around like he was seeing the place for the first time. He'd grown up here, had lived in this house until he went to college. But he was looking at it like a stranger, like he couldn't quite remember how all these rooms fit together. We sat in the living room. I didn't offer him coffee or tea or any of the hospitality rituals I'd always performed. Just sat and waited. So, he said. You went to Ireland. I did. Must have been nice. It was. Another long silence. Jessica's parents are trying to get full custody, he finally said. They're arguing that I'm financially unstable, that I enabled Aiden's behavior, that I'm not capable of providing a stable home environment. And they're using you, the fact that my own mother cut me off, as evidence that I'm not fit to have the girls. David. I'm not here to ask for money, he said quickly. I know you won't give it to me anyway. I wanted you to know what your choices cost me, what they're costing the girls. My choices didn't cost you anything. Your choices did. Living beyond your means, enabling Aiden, laughing when he hit me, those were your choices. I just stopped subsidizing them. Right. Your boundaries. He said it like a curse word. Everyone's so proud of you for your boundaries. Carol, your lawyer, probably half the town. Eleanor Whitmore, finally standing up for herself. What a hero. I'm not trying to be a hero. No. You're just trying to punish me for not being the son you wanted. David. I leaned forward, making him look at me. I need you to really hear this. I love you. I have always loved you. But love doesn't mean accepting unacceptable behavior. It doesn't mean funding a lifestyle you can't afford. It doesn't mean letting your child slap me and pretending it's fine. Love means wanting better for you, even when you hate me for it. I don't hate you. Don't you? He looked away. I'm angry at you. That's not the same thing. Why are you angry? Really? Is it because I stopped giving you money? Or is it because I forced you to confront the reality of your situation? You don't understand what it's like. The pressure. Medical school debt, the mortgage, Jessica's expectations, trying to give the kids everything they need. No one needs a vacation home, David. No one needs private school when there are good public schools available. Those aren't needs. They're wants. And you've been using my money to fund your wants while convincing yourself they were needs. So what was I supposed to do? Let my kids go to public school with whoever goes there? Lower our standard of living? Disappoint Jessica? Yes. All of those things if necessary. That's called living within your means. That's called being an adult. He stood up abruptly. I came here hoping we could have a real conversation. That maybe you'd softened after your trip. But you're still the same judgmental, controlling person you've always been. And you're still the same person who blames everyone else for your problems, I said calmly. When does it end, David? When do you look in the mirror and take responsibility for your own life? When do you take responsibility for ruining mine? I didn't ruin your life. I just stopped fixing it. There's a difference. He walked to the door, then turned back. The custody hearing is in 3 weeks. If you testify on my behalf, if you tell the judge that I'm a good father, that you support me having custody, I'll consider letting you see the girls again. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. You're bargaining with access to my grandchildren. I'm doing what I have to do, just like you did what you had to do. David, if you're a good father, if you're really the parent those girls need, then you don't need me to tell a judge that. It should be obvious. So that's a no. That's a I won't lie under oath to help you get something you may not deserve. His face hardened. Fine. Then don't expect to see Sophia or Emma anytime soon. Or ever, actually. I'll make sure of it. He left, slamming the door behind him. I sat in the silence, shaking. He'd actually done it. Actually threatened to cut me off from the girls unless I gave him what he wanted. And I'd still said no. I'd chosen truth over access. Boundaries over manipulation. My integrity over his demands. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. And it was right. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Mark helped me draft a statement for the custody hearing, not testifying on David's behalf, but offering to provide support for the girls if needed. Character references. Resources. A safe place to visit. Dr. Morrison agreed to write a letter confirming my mental competency, just in case Theodore Walsh tried to use that angle again. I reached out to Amanda Liu at Ashford, who agreed to provide documentation of Aiden's behavioral history and the school's interactions with David and Jessica. I built a case, not against David, exactly, but for the girls. For what they needed, what they deserved, what would actually serve their well-being rather than their parents' egos. Carol came over most evenings. We ate dinner together, watched old movies, talked about everything and nothing. She was there the night before the hearing, helping me choose what to wear, reminding me to breathe, assuring me that I was doing the right thing. What if I'm not? I asked. What if I'm destroying my relationship with my son for nothing? What if the girls end up hating me? Then you'll survive that too, Carol said. You'll survive because you're strong and because you're right and because you've finally learned that you can't sacrifice yourself to save people who don't want to be saved. The custody hearing was held at the probate court on a Thursday morning. I arrived early, dressed in my navy suit, armed with documents and truth and the bone-deep certainty that I was exactly where I needed to be. David was there with his lawyer. Jessica's parents were there with theirs. Jessica herself appeared via video call from her treatment facility, looking thin and exhausted but more present than I'd seen her in months. The judge was a woman in her 50s named Sandra Chen. She had kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, and she spent the first hour reviewing documents and asking questions. When it was time for testimony, I was called to the stand. I told the truth. About Christmas dinner. About the slap. About the years of financial support and the entitled behavior it had enabled. About Aiden's expulsion and Tyler Rodriguez's nightmares. About Sophia walking 3 miles alone and Emma's gap-toothed smile and my fear that these children were being failed by every adult in their lives. About choosing boundaries and what it had cost me. David's lawyer tried to paint me as vindictive, as using money to control my family, as abandoning my grandchildren out of spite. Judge Chen shut him down. Mr. Patterson, I've reviewed Mrs. Whitmore's financial records and the timeline of events. She provided substantial support for years and withdrew it after a specific incident of disrespect. That's not financial abuse. That's a natural consequence. Move on. When it was David's turn, he tried to argue that he was a good father, that he just needed time to get back on his feet, that his mother's actions had destabilized his family. Judge Chen asked him directly, Dr. Whitmore, when your 12-year-old son struck your mother in the face, what consequence did he face? David hesitated. It was handled internally. How? We talked to him about it. What else? Nothing else was necessary. It was a one-time thing. Was it? Because according to school records, Your son has a documented pattern of aggressive behavior toward peers. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was part of a pattern that you and your wife ignored until he was expelled. The hearing lasted 4 hours. When it was over, Judge Chen took a 10-minute recess and came back with her decision. Temporary custody would remain with Theodore and Margaret Walsh, with regular supervised visitation for David and unsupervised visitation for Jessica once she completed treatment. But, and this was the part that made my breath catch, I was granted visitation rights as well. Mrs. Whitmore has demonstrated consistent love and support for her grandchildren while maintaining appropriate boundaries with their parents. She has provided evidence of a stable home environment and a willingness to support the children's well-being. She will be allowed weekly visitation with Sophia and Emma, pending the children's consent. Pending the children's consent. They weren't being forced to see me, but they were being given the choice. It was more than I'd hoped for. That weekend, Carol drove me to Theodore and Margaret Walsh's house for my first official visit with the girls. They lived in a mansion, there was no other word for it, in the wealthiest part of Fairfield. All white columns and manicured lawns and the kind of quiet that money buys. Margaret answered the door, her expression cold. Mrs. Whitmore. Mrs. Walsh. Thank you for having me. She didn't invite me in, just called over her shoulder. Sophia. Emma. Your grandmother is here. There was a moment, maybe 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours, where I held my breath and waited. Then Sophia appeared at the top of the stairs, Emma right behind her. Grandma. Emma shrieked and came running, barreling into me so hard I almost fell over. Sophia followed more slowly, but when she reached me, she wrapped her arms around my waist and held on tight. I missed you, she whispered. I missed you too. Both of you. So much. We spent the afternoon in Theodore's back garden, acres of it, perfect and impersonal and nothing like my wild, overgrown yard at home. But the girls didn't care about the setting. They just wanted to talk. They told me about their new school, their new routines, their sessions with the counselor that Grandpa Theodore had arranged. Emma showed me the gap where she'd lost another tooth. Sophia told me about the book series she was reading and made me promise to read it too so we could talk about it. We didn't talk about Aiden or their parents or the custody battle or any of the heavy things. We just were. Grandmother and granddaughters. Simple. Uncomplicated. Exactly what we all needed. When it was time for me to leave, Emma hugged me again. Can you come back next week? If you want me to. We want you to, Sophia said firmly. Every week. Promise. I promise. As Carol drove me home, I watched the Walsh mansion disappear in the rearview mirror, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not because everything was fixed. Not because my family was whole. Not because the hard parts were over. But because I'd chosen myself, held my boundaries, told the truth, and the people who mattered most, Sophia and Emma, still wanted me in their lives. That was enough. It had to be enough. And somehow, miraculously, it was.